Why don't you have a girlfriend, Caleb? 5 words. That's all it took to shatter the careful walls a single father had built around his heart. Caleb Morris froze, his daughter asleep upstairs, his best friend Rachel sitting across from him with that gentle, unknowing smile. The truth? He couldn't date anyone else because he'd been in love with her for years. But how do you tell your closest friend, the woman who helps raise your daughter, who stayed when everyone else left, that she's the reason you can't move on? Tonight, that secret would finally break free. If you want to see how this single dad's confession changes everything, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The house settled into its familiar evening silence, the kind that wrapped around Caleb Morris like a worn blanket, comforting yet somehow suffocating. Upstairs, his 6-year-old daughter Emma slept soundly, her nightlight casting soft shadows of butterflies across her bedroom wall. Downstairs, Caleb sat in his living room, the weight of parenthood temporarily lifted from his shoulders, replaced by something far more complicated. Rachel Nolan sat curled up on the opposite end of his couch, her legs tucked beneath her, a mug of chamomile tea warming her hands. She'd been there since dinner, helping Emma with a school project about family trees, a topic that always made Caleb's chest tighten. Rachel had a gift for making the complicated parts of single parenthood feel lighter, turning potentially painful conversations into opportunities for Emma to understand her story without drowning in sadness. "She's really something, you know," Rachel said softly, her eyes reflecting the dim lamplight. "The way she talked about her mom tonight? No fear, just honest curiosity. You've done an incredible job with her, Caleb." Caleb managed a small smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I had help. Still do." His gaze lingered on Rachel for a moment too long before he looked away, focusing on the coffee table scattered with Emma's art supplies. 3 years. It had been 3 years since Sarah died. 3 years since Caleb's world had fractured and reformed around the singular purpose of keeping Emma safe, loved, and whole. 3 years of stumbling through fatherhood alone, except he'd never really been alone. Rachel had been there through every impossible night, every milestone, every moment when grief threatened to pull him under. The comfortable silence between them stretched like a familiar song, one they'd been playing for so long that neither questioned the melody anymore. Rachel took a sip of her tea, studying Caleb over the rim of her mug with that particular look she got sometimes, the one that said she was working up to something. "Can I ask you something?" Her voice carried a careful lightness that immediately put Caleb on edge. "You just did," he replied, attempting humor to deflect whatever was coming. Rachel rolled her eyes, a gesture so familiar it made his heart ache. "Smart ass, I'm serious." "When are you ever not serious?" Caleb shifted in his seat, trying to appear relaxed even as tension crept up his spine. She set her mug down on the coffee table with deliberate care, her expression shifting into something more vulnerable. "Why don't you have a girlfriend, Caleb?" The question landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through the careful equilibrium they'd maintained for years. Caleb felt his body go rigid, his fingers tightening around the armrest of the couch. The simple question carried the weight of everything he'd kept buried, every feeling he'd locked away, every moment he'd watched Rachel and wanted to reach across the distance between them. He started, then stopped, his throat suddenly dry. "That's a random question." "Is it?" Rachel tilted her head, her dark hair falling over one shoulder. "You haven't dated anyone since Sarah. Not seriously, anyway. You're young, Caleb. You're 32, you're a great dad, She paused, something flickering across her face too quickly for him to read. "You're a good man. Don't you want that again? Partnership, companionship?" Love, Caleb thought, the word echoing in his mind. "I want love. I have love. I'm sitting across from it right now." But he couldn't say that. He couldn't shatter the one relationship that had kept him steady through the worst storm of his life. Rachel was Emma's constant, his constant. She was Thursday night dinners and Saturday morning pancakes. She was the emergency contact at Emma's school, the person who knew exactly how Caleb took his coffee and which movies would make him cry. She was woven into the fabric of their lives so completely that losing her would unravel everything. "I'm busy," he said finally, hating how weak the excuse sounded even to his own ears. Emma needs stability right now, not a parade of women trying to figure out if they want to sign up for instant motherhood. Rachel's expression softened with sympathy, and somehow that made it worse. Caleb, you can't put your life on hold forever. Emma would want you to be happy. I am happy, he lied, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. Are you? The question was gentle but insistent, and Rachel leaned forward, her eyes searching his face. Because sometimes I watch you and I see this distance in your eyes, like you're somewhere else entirely, like you're waiting for something. Someone, he wanted to correct. I'm waiting for someone who's already here but feels impossibly far away. Caleb forced himself to hold her gaze, even as his heart hammered against his ribs. I'm fine, Rach. Really? I appreciate the concern, but I'm exactly where I need to be. She studied him for a long moment, and Caleb could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. Rachel had always been able to read him too well, even when he desperately wished she couldn't. They'd known each other since they were teenagers, had grown up in the same small neighborhood in Portland, their lives intertwining long before either of them understood what that would mean. Okay, she said finally, but her tone suggested she didn't believe him at all. But you know you can talk to me, right? About anything. We've been through too much together for you to shut me out now. The irony of her words nearly broke him. She thought he was shutting her out, when the truth was she'd been living inside his heart for so long he couldn't remember what it felt like before she was there. I know, he managed, his voice rougher than intended. You've always been there. And I'm not going anywhere, Rachel promised, reaching across the couch to squeeze his hand. Her touch sent electricity up his arm, a jolt of awareness that he'd learned to suppress but never eliminate. Caleb looked down at their joined hands, her fingers slender and warm against his rougher ones, and felt the familiar ache of wanting something he'd convinced himself he couldn't have. When Rachel pulled away, standing to gather her things, Caleb felt the loss like a physical thing. I should get going. Early meeting tomorrow. She smiled, tucking her hair behind her ear in that unconscious gesture he'd memorized years ago. Tell Emma I'll see her Thursday. We still on for the Science Museum? She'd never forgive me if we canceled, Caleb said, standing as well. You've created a monster with all these educational outings. A curious, brilliant monster, Rachel corrected, slipping on her jacket. The best kind. Caleb walked her to the door, their nightly ritual playing out with practiced ease. Rachel paused on the threshold, the cool October air drifting in from outside, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and approaching rain. Caleb? She said, turning back to face him. Yeah? I just want you to be happy. You deserve that. After everything you've been through, everything you've survived, you deserve to let yourself feel something good again. I do feel something good, he thought desperately. Every time you walk through that door, every time you laugh at one of Emma's terrible jokes, every time you look at me like you're looking at me right now. Thanks, Rach, he said instead. Drive safe. She gave him one more searching look before stepping out into the night. Caleb watched her walk to her car, the streetlights casting long shadows across his quiet suburban street. He stood in the doorway until her taillights disappeared around the corner, the familiar ache in his chest settling back into its permanent home. When he finally closed the door, the house felt emptier than it had before she'd arrived. Caleb leaned against the wood, closing his eyes and letting out a long breath. The question echoed in his mind. Why don't you have a girlfriend? Because the woman he loved was his best friend. Because she'd already lost so much helping him through his grief. How could he ask her to take on more? Because being Emma's Aunt Rachel was safe, uncomplicated, and if he ruined that with his feelings, he'd lose everything that mattered. Because he was a coward. Caleb pushed off from the door and moved through his house, checking locks and turning off lights with automatic precision. He paused outside Emma's room, cracking the door to look in on his daughter. She slept peacefully, her dark hair splayed across her pillow, one arm wrapped around the stuffed elephant Rachel had given her for her 4th birthday. Everything in his life was intertwined with Rachel. She wasn't just present in the big moments. She was woven through the small ones, too. The elephant Emma couldn't sleep without. The coffee maker in his kitchen that she'd bought him when his old one died. The photo on the mantle from Emma's kindergarten graduation, Caleb, Emma, and Rachel, looking for all the world like a family. That's what they were, in every way except the one that mattered most to him. They were a family built on friendship and necessity, held together by Rachel's endless capacity for showing up. And Caleb had fallen so deeply in love with her that he couldn't imagine a way out that didn't destroy everything. He closed Emma's door gently and headed to his own room, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on his shoulders. Sleep, when it finally came, brought dreams of Rachel, sitting across from him, asking questions he couldn't answer, looking at him with those eyes that saw too much, and somehow not enough. The next morning arrived with the chaos that defined weekday mornings in the Morris household. Emma bounced into Caleb's room at 6:30, her energy already at maximum capacity, despite the early hour. "Daddy! Daddy! Is it Thursday yet?" She launched herself onto his bed with the reckless abandon of a child who'd never learned to doubt gravity. Caleb groaned, pulling a pillow over his face. "Em, it's Wednesday. Thursday is tomorrow. But I want to see Aunt Rachel now. She promised we'd look at the dinosaur bones, and Mrs. Peterson said the T-Rex skeleton is as tall as a building." "Not quite as tall as a building," Caleb corrected, sitting up and pulling his daughter into a hug. "And you'll see Rachel tomorrow. You saw her last night." "That was forever ago," Emma insisted with the dramatic certainty of a 6-year-old. "I have so many things to tell her." Caleb felt that familiar squeeze in his chest. Emma adored Rachel, and why wouldn't she? Rachel had been there for every important moment Emma could remember. While other kids at school talked about their moms, Emma talked about Aunt Rachel, the woman who braided her hair for special occasions, who knew all the words to her favorite songs, who made her feel loved and special and seen. Sometimes Caleb wondered if Emma sensed what he felt, if children had some instinctual understanding of the unspoken. But Emma never questioned their arrangement, never asked why Aunt Rachel went to her own house instead of staying with them. To her, their life was normal. It was all she'd known for most of her conscious memory. They moved through their morning routine, breakfast, getting dressed, the eternal battle over whether Emma could wear her princess dress to school. She could not, despite her very compelling arguments. Caleb dropped her off at Lincoln Elementary at 7:45, watching her run toward her classroom with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. "Mr. Morris?" a voice called out as he turned to leave. Caleb turned to find Jessica Martinez, another parent he'd gotten to know through school functions and playground small talk. She stood near the entrance, her son already disappeared into the building, a friendly smile on her face. "Hey, Jessica, how's it going?" "Good. Listen, I wanted to ask you something." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture that reminded him painfully of Rachel. "A few of us parents are getting together Friday night. Dinner and drinks at that new Italian place downtown. Nothing fancy, just a chance to talk to adults for once. Would you want to join us?" The invitation was casual, but Caleb caught something else in her expression, a hopefulness that made him uncomfortable. Jessica was nice, attractive, single. He knew she'd been through a divorce a year ago. Under different circumstances, he might have been interested. Under different circumstances, he might have been a lot of things. "I appreciate the invite," he said carefully, "but I've got Emma this weekend." "Rachel could watch her, couldn't she?" Jessica's smile didn't waver. "I've seen you two together. She seems great with Emma." "She's great with Emma. She's great with everything. That's the problem." "She's got plans," Caleb lied, feeling guilty even as the words left his mouth. "But thanks for thinking of me." He could see the disappointment flicker across Jessica's face before she covered it with practiced grace. "Sure, of course. Maybe next time." She gave a little wave and headed toward the parking lot. Caleb walked to his car, his jaw tight. It wasn't the first time someone had tried to set him up or invite him out. His status as a single dad seemed to make him either sympathetically off-limits or intriguingly available, depending on who was looking. But every invitation felt like a betrayal of what he really wanted, even if what he wanted remained carefully unacknowledged. His phone buzzed as he slid into the driver's seat. A text from Rachel. "Coffee before work? My treat." Caleb stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. He should say no. He should create some distance, protect himself from this constant proximity to something he couldn't have. Instead, he typed, "Usual place, 15 minutes?" Her response was immediate. "Perfect. See you soon." He sat in the parking lot for a moment, his forehead resting against the steering wheel. This was his pattern, pushing away everyone who might actually be available while running toward the one person who'd never be his. It was self-destructive, and he knew it, but knowing didn't make it easier to change. 20 minutes later, Caleb walked into Common Grounds, the coffee shop that had become their unofficial meeting spot. Rachel was already there, sitting at their usual table by the window, 2 cups in front of her. She'd ordered for him, black coffee with 1 sugar, the way he'd been drinking it since college. "You're late," she said with mock severity as he approached. "Traffic," he lied, sliding into the seat across from her. "Liar! You just took longer convincing yourself this was a good idea." Caleb froze, his hand halfway to his coffee cup. "What?" Rachel's expression was unreadable. "Coming here, seeing me. You've been weird since last night. Did I overstep? With the girlfriend question?" "No, of course not." The lie came easily, too easily. "I just didn't sleep well." "Caleb." She said his name like a gentle reprimand, like she could see through every defense he'd carefully constructed. "Talk to me. Real talk, not the edited version you give everyone else." He took a sip of coffee to buy time, the liquid almost too hot against his tongue. The coffee shop hummed with morning activity around them, the hiss of the espresso machine, the low murmur of other conversations, the soft jazz playing from overhead speakers. It all felt too normal for the way his heart was racing. "I'm fine," he said finally, "just thinking about a lot of things." "Like? Like how I'm in love with you. Like how I've wasted 3 years being too scared to tell you. Like how the thought of you with someone else makes me want to break things. Like whether I'm doing right by Emma," he said instead, which wasn't entirely a lie. "Whether she needs more than what I can give her." Rachel's expression softened with understanding. "You're an amazing father, Caleb. Emma is thriving. She's happy. She's confident. She knows she's loved. What more could you possibly give her?" A mother, he thought. A complete family. The courage to let someone in. "I don't know," he admitted. "Sometimes I look at other families, the whole package, 2 parents, siblings, family vacations, and I wonder if I'm being selfish keeping things the way they are." "You're not keeping things any particular way," Rachel pointed out gently. "You're just living your life, raising your daughter. There's nothing selfish about that." "But what if there could be more? What if I'm holding back because it's comfortable, not because it's right?" Rachel set down her cup, leaning forward with sudden intensity. "Is this about last night? Because I wasn't trying to pressure you, Caleb. I want you to be happy. And sometimes I worry that you've convinced yourself that happiness isn't allowed anymore." "It's not that simple," Caleb said, his voice strained. "Why not?" "Because—" He stopped, the truth pressing against his lips like something alive, desperate to escape. "Because happiness is complicated when you're responsible for someone else. Every choice I make affects Emma. Every person I bring into our lives becomes part of her life too. I can't just think about what I want." "What do you want?" Rachel asked softly. The question hung between them like a challenge. Caleb looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the familiar lines of her face, the concern in her eyes, the way she leaned toward him as if she could physically close the distance his words created. She wore a blue sweater that brought out the color of her eyes, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger than her 30 years. "I want you," his mind screamed. "I want to stop pretending we're just friends. I want to wake up next to you and have you be the first person Emma sees in the morning. I want to build a life that doesn't require you to leave at the end of the night." "I want what's best for Emma," he said, the coward's answer. Rachel sat back, and something flickered across her face, disappointment maybe, or frustration. "You always say that. Like what's best for Emma can't also be what's best for you. Can it?" The question came out more sharply than he intended. "I think you use Emma as an excuse sometimes," Rachel said, her voice careful but firm. "I think you're so afraid of getting hurt again that you hide behind being a dad. And don't get me wrong, you're an incredible father, but you're also a person, Caleb. You're allowed to want things for yourself." The words hit too close to home, peeling back layers of defense he'd spent years building. Caleb felt suddenly exposed, like Rachel could see every thought he'd tried to hide. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "Then help me understand." She reached across the table, her hand open in invitation. "Whatever it is, whatever you're holding on to, You can tell me. Caleb stared at her outstretched hand, at the chance she was offering him. He could feel the words building in his chest, pressing against his sternum. I'm in love with you. I've been in love with you for so long I can't remember what it felt like before. You're the reason I can't date anyone else, the reason I wake up every morning, and the reason I can't sleep at night. But with those words would come consequences he couldn't control. Rachel would either feel the same, an impossible dream that terrified him almost as much as the alternative, or she wouldn't. And if she didn't, he'd lose her. Emma would lose her. They'd lose the careful balance that had kept them all afloat. He couldn't risk it. He couldn't be that selfish. There's nothing to tell, Caleb said, pulling his hand back before he could reach for hers. I'm just tired. It's been a long week. The lie settled between them like a wall. Rachel's expression shifted, hurt and understanding warring on her face, but she didn't push. She never pushed, which was both a blessing and a curse. Okay, she said softly, withdrawing her hand, but I'm here when you're ready. You know that, right? I know. And he did know. That was the worst part. Rachel would listen, would understand, would probably even forgive him for keeping this secret so long. But forgiveness didn't guarantee reciprocation, and reciprocation didn't guarantee that they wouldn't destroy the beautiful thing they'd built in the process. They finished their coffee in relative silence, the comfortable ease from earlier replaced by something more fragile. When Rachel stood to leave, gathering her purse and jacket, Caleb felt the familiar pang of watching her go. I'll see you tomorrow, she said. Museum trip with Emma. She's been talking about it non-stop. Rachel smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Good. That's good. She hesitated, like there was more she wanted to say, but instead she just gave a small wave and headed for the door. Caleb watched her leave, just like he'd watched her leave 1,000 times before. The pattern was familiar, safe, and absolutely unsustainable. He knew that. He'd known it for years. But knowing and changing were two different things, separated by a chasm of fear he didn't know how to cross. His phone buzzed again, a text from his sister Claire. How are you doing? Really? Claire lived in Seattle, far enough away that she couldn't witness his daily struggles, but close enough that she called regularly to check in. She'd been the only person besides Rachel who'd stayed constant after Sarah died, who'd shown up without being asked and loved Emma fiercely. Caleb typed back. Fine. Busy with Emma and work. Her response was immediate. That's not what I asked. How are you? He stared at the message, thinking about Rachel's earlier question. What do you want? Everyone seemed determined to make him examine his own happiness, to force him to acknowledge the gaps in his carefully constructed life. I'm managing, he wrote back, which was the truest thing he could say. Have you talked to Rachel? Claire's text made him freeze. About how you feel. Don't, he typed quickly. Someone has to say it. You're miserable, Caleb, and you're making yourself miserable by not being honest with her. It's not that simple. It is that simple. You love her. Either tell her or move on, but stop existing in this weird limbo where neither of you can be happy. Caleb almost called her, almost picked up the phone to explain that it wasn't limbo, it was survival, that telling Rachel could mean losing her, and losing her would break something in Emma that had just started to heal. But he didn't call because Claire would see through his excuses just like Rachel had. Instead, he pocketed his phone and headed to his office, trying to lose himself in the routines of work. He spent the day reviewing architectural plans for a community center project. The precision of measurements and materials, a welcome distraction from the chaos of his personal life. But even there, Rachel crept in. She'd been the one to encourage him to pursue architecture back in college, had stayed up with him through late-night drafting sessions, had believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. She was everywhere, woven into the fabric of who he'd become. And he didn't know how to separate loving her from needing her, or needing her from being terrified of losing her. Thursday arrived with Emma's barely contained excitement. She wore her favorite dinosaur t-shirt to school, the one Rachel had gotten her from a previous museum trip, and spent breakfast explaining in detail which exhibits she wanted to see. The pteranodon is technically not a dinosaur, she informed Caleb seriously, but it lived in the same time period. Aunt Rachel says we can see the flying reptile section too. Did she now? Caleb smiled despite the knot in his stomach. That's very educational of her. Aunt Rachel knows everything, Emma declared with absolute certainty. She doesn't know everything, Caleb thought. She doesn't know that every time she walks through our door, my whole world lights up. She doesn't know that I plan my days around the moments I might see her. She doesn't know that when she's here, I can breathe easier. After dropping Emma at school, Caleb tried to focus on work, but his mind kept drifting to the afternoon ahead. Rachel had taken the afternoon off specifically for this museum trip, something she did regularly, making space in her busy life to show up for Emma, for him. The weight of her constancy pressed down on him. How many women would dedicate so much time and energy to someone else's child? How many people showed that kind of commitment without obligation, driven only by love and loyalty? At 2:30, Caleb left his office early to pick up Emma. She practically vibrated with excitement in her car seat, talking a mile a minute about fossils and extinction events. They drove to Rachel's apartment, a small but warmly decorated space in northwest Portland, where she was waiting outside, already smiling as they pulled up. "There's my favorite paleontologist," Rachel called as Emma burst from the car and ran into her arms. "Aunt Rachel, did you know that the Stegosaurus's brain was only as big as a walnut?" "I did know that, actually. Pretty wild, right?" Rachel lifted Emma easily, spinning her once before setting her down. Her eyes found Caleb's over Emma's head, and something unreadable passed between them. The lingering awkwardness from yesterday's coffee shop conversation, maybe, or something else entirely. "Hey," Caleb said, aiming for casual and landing somewhere near strained. "Hey yourself." Rachel's smile was gentler now, meant just for him. "Ready for some dinosaur education?" "As ready as I'll ever be." The drive to the museum was filled with Emma's enthusiasm, which helped dilute the tension Caleb felt. Rachel sat in the passenger seat, occasionally glancing at him when Emma's attention was focused out the window. Each time their eyes met, Caleb felt that familiar jolt of awareness, the one he'd been suppressing for years. At the museum, Emma dragged them from exhibit to exhibit, her excitement infectious. Caleb hung back, camera in hand, capturing moments, Emma pointing up at the massive T-Rex skeleton, her mouth open in awe. Rachel crouching down to read plaques with Emma, both of them laughing at some shared joke. The two of them posing in front of the Triceratops. Rachel's arm around Emma's shoulders, both grinning at the camera. Looking through the viewfinder, Caleb saw what an outsider might see. A family. Mother and daughter, so natural together that no one would question it. The thought sent a sharp pain through his chest, mingled with longing so intense it almost staggered him. "Daddy, come take a picture with us." Emma waved him over. Caleb handed his phone to a nearby visitor who kindly agreed to help. He moved to stand beside Rachel and Emma, hyper-aware of Rachel's proximity. When she slipped her arm around his waist, casual and familiar, he nearly stopped breathing. "Say Stegosaurus," Emma demanded. "Stegosaurus!" They chorused, and Caleb felt Rachel's laugh vibrate through her whole body. The stranger returned his phone, showing them the photo. The three of them stood bathed in the museum's warm lighting, Emma in front with their hands on her shoulders, all of them genuinely happy. Caleb stared at the image, seeing everything he wanted and couldn't have captured in pixels. "That's a keeper," Rachel said softly, close enough that her breath tickled his ear. "Yeah," he managed. "It is." They spent 2 more hours wandering through exhibits, Emma's energy somehow never flagging. But eventually, even her enthusiasm began to wane, and they found themselves in the museum cafe, Emma coloring on a kids' menu while Caleb and Rachel sipped coffee. "She had a blast," Rachel observed, watching Emma with obvious affection. "Thanks to you. You didn't have to take time off work for this." "I wanted to." Rachel turned her attention to him, her expression serious. "I love spending time with her, with both of you." The words settled warmly in Caleb's chest, dangerous in their simple honesty. "Can I ask you something?" Rachel continued, her voice dropping lower so Emma wouldn't overhear. "And I want you to really think about the answer." Caleb tensed. "Okay." "Are you happy?" She held up a hand before he could answer. "And don't give me the automatic response. Don't tell me about Emma or work or how fine everything is. I want to know if you, Caleb Morris, are genuinely happy with your life." The question cut through all his defenses, laid him bare in the middle of a museum cafe surrounded by other families. Caleb looked at Emma, absorbed in her coloring, then back at Rachel, whose eyes held something that looked like desperate hope. He started, then stopped. What was the truth? Was he happy? He had Emma, who was his whole world. He had Rachel, in whatever capacity she was willing to give. He had a good job, a nice house, stability. I'm grateful for what I have. And that's not the same thing. Maybe it's enough. Is it? Rachel leaned forward, and Caleb saw something break in her expression, frustration or sadness, or both. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're settling, like you've decided that surviving is the same as living. What do you want me to say? The words came out harsher than intended, and Emma looked up briefly before returning to her coloring. I want you to be honest. With me. With yourself. Rachel's voice cracked slightly. I want you to stop hiding behind Emma and safety and all the walls you've built. I want to know what you actually want from your life. You, Caleb thought desperately. I want you. I want this, he gestured between them, to be real. I want to stop pretending. I want to stop watching you leave at the end of every day. I want to wake up next to you and have breakfast as a family and not have to hide how I feel every second we're together. But he couldn't say any of that. Not here. Not with Emma 10 feet away. Not when saying it might destroy everything. I want to give Emma a good life, he said instead. The coward's answer again. Rachel sat back, and Caleb watched something close off in her expression. Right. Of course. She glanced at her watch. We should probably get going. I have an early meeting tomorrow. The rest of the evening passed in a fog of strained politeness. They drove back to Rachel's apartment, Emma chattering obliviously about her favorite exhibits. When they pulled up, Rachel gave Emma a long hug but barely looked at Caleb. Thanks for today, he tried, but it sounded hollow even to his own ears. Any time, Rachel replied automatically. She paused with her hand on the door handle. Caleb? I meant what I said, about being honest. Life's too short to spend it pretending. Then she was gone, disappearing into her building before he could formulate a response. On the drive home, Emma fell asleep in her car seat, exhausted from the day's excitement. Caleb drove on autopilot, Rachel's words echoing in his mind. Life's too short to spend it pretending. But what if the pretending was the only thing holding everything together? What if honesty meant risking the one constant Emma had known? What if he told Rachel the truth and she didn't feel the same, and suddenly those Thursday afternoons and weekend pancakes disappeared? How was he supposed to risk that? Later that night, after Emma was in bed, Caleb sat alone in his living room, the house oppressively quiet. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through the day's photos. There were dozens of Emma, smiling, pointing, laughing, and mixed in between, candid shots of Rachel. Rachel helping Emma read an exhibit placard. Rachel looking up at the massive fossils with wonder. Rachel caught mid-laugh. Her whole face lit up with joy. And that final family photo, the three of them looking for all the world like they belonged together. Caleb's thumb hovered over Rachel's contact information. He could call her. He could tell her everything right now, let the words spill out in a desperate confession. She'd said she wanted honesty, but what would come after the honesty? What if his confession changed everything, and not in the way he hoped? His phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Did you talk to her yet? No, he typed back. You're running out of time, Caleb. Life doesn't wait for you to feel ready. He stared at her message, a chill running down his spine. What do you mean? I just know that opportunities don't last forever. Don't let fear make your decisions for you. Caleb set his phone down, his sister's words adding to the weight already pressing on his chest. He looked around his living room, at the photos on the mantle, the toys scattered in the corner, the throw blanket Rachel had bought him last Christmas draped over the couch, evidence of the life he'd built and the woman who'd helped him build it. Tomorrow he'd go to work. He'd pick up Emma from school. Maybe he'd see Rachel, maybe he wouldn't. The comfortable routine would continue, safe and familiar, and slowly suffocating him with all the words he couldn't say. Why don't you have a girlfriend? Rachel's question from days ago whispered through his mind. Because the only woman I want is you, and I'm too terrified to risk losing what we already have. But maybe Rachel was right. Maybe surviving wasn't enough. Maybe there came a point where you had to choose between safety and truth, between protecting what you had and reaching for what you needed. Caleb just didn't know if he was brave enough to make that choice. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But somewhere in the back of his mind, Claire's warning echoed, "You're running out of time." He wondered what she knew that he didn't, and the thought kept him awake long into the night. The following weeks passed in a blur of carefully maintained distance. Caleb found himself performing an intricate dance, close enough to Rachel to maintain their friendship, far enough to protect his heart from further damage. She seemed to sense the shift, responding with her own subtle withdrawal. Their Thursday traditions continued, but something had changed in the spaces between words, in the careful way they avoided prolonged eye contact, in how Rachel now texted before coming over instead of just showing up. Emma noticed first, of course. Children always did. "Is Aunt Rachel mad at us?" she asked one morning over breakfast, her spoon suspended halfway to her mouth, milk dripping back into her cereal bowl. Caleb's chest tightened. "No, sweetheart. Why would you think that? She doesn't stay as long anymore. And you both get quiet sometimes, like when I'm in trouble and you're deciding my punishment." Emma's 6-year-old logic was painfully accurate. "Did we do something wrong?" "You didn't do anything wrong, Em. I promise." Caleb reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "Rachel's just been busy with work. Adults get stressed sometimes." "You should give her ice cream," Emma suggested seriously. "Ice cream makes everything better." If only it were that simple. If only he could fix the growing chasm between them with something as pure as a child's solution. But the distance wasn't from lack of trying. It was from trying too hard to maintain something unsustainable. That afternoon, Caleb sat in his office reviewing blueprints for a new residential development when his phone rang. Rachel's name lit up the screen, and his heart did that familiar skip it always did when she called. "Hey," he answered, trying to sound casual. "Hey, listen, I need to talk to you about something. Can you meet me for lunch?" The seriousness in her tone sent alarm bells ringing through his mind. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, fine. It's better in person. That sandwich place on Morrison? I'll be there in 20 minutes. The drive downtown felt longer than it should have, Caleb's mind racing through possibilities. Maybe she'd met someone. Maybe she'd finally gotten tired of their complicated dynamic and was going to suggest they take a break from each other. Maybe she'd somehow figured out his feelings, and this was the gentle letdown conversation he'd been dreading for years. Rachel was already seated at a corner table when he arrived, 2 sandwiches and drinks already ordered. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, her hair pulled back in a messy bun that suggested she'd been running late this morning. "You look exhausted," Caleb said as he slid into the seat across from her. "Thanks. You really know how to make a girl feel special." But her smile was strained, not reaching her eyes. She pushed one of the sandwiches toward him. "Turkey and Swiss, extra mustard." "You remembered." "I always remember." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither of them acknowledged. They ate in silence for a few moments, the lunch rush humming around them. Caleb waited, knowing Rachel would speak when she was ready. She'd always been that way, thoughtful, deliberate, never rushing important conversations. "I've been thinking a lot about what I said at the museum," she finally began, her fingers shredding a napkin into tiny pieces. "About honesty and not pretending." "Rach, let me finish, please." She took a shaky breath. "I've been unfair to you, pushing you to open up when I've been keeping my own secrets. And that's not how friendship works, is it? It can't be one-sided." Caleb's pulse quickened. "What are you talking about?" Rachel met his eyes, and he saw something raw there, something vulnerable he'd never quite seen before. "Do you remember when we first met? We were, 15? You just moved to the neighborhood, and I was the awkward girl who spent more time reading than talking to people. You weren't awkward. You were smart, intimidatingly smart. You were the first person who didn't make me feel weird for preferring books to parties." A sad smile crossed her face. "You became my best friend so quickly it scared me. I'd never had that before. Someone who just got me." "I felt the same way," Caleb admitted quietly. "I know. That's what made it so easy. We just fit." Rachel paused, gathering her thoughts. "Then you met Sarah." The name landed like a stone. Caleb rarely talked about his late partner, the grief still too raw even after 3 years. But Rachel had been there through all of it, the whirlwind romance, the unexpected pregnancy, the rushed courthouse wedding, the devastating diagnosis that came when Emma was barely 2. You loved her so much, Rachel continued, her voice thick. And I was happy for you. I was. Watching you become a father, seeing how dedicated you were. I'd never been prouder of anyone. But there was also this tiny, selfish part of me that wondered where I fit anymore. You had this whole life that didn't need me. That's not true. I always needed you. Did you? The question wasn't accusatory, just genuinely curious. Because from where I stood, it felt like I was watching from the outside. And then Sarah got sick and everything changed again. Caleb remembered those horrible months with painful clarity. The endless doctor appointments, the treatments that weren't working, Sarah's slow deterioration while they both tried to keep things normal for Emma. And Rachel, always Rachel, showing up with meals, taking Emma for afternoons at the park, sitting with Sarah when Caleb had to work. You saved us, he said hoarsely. When Sarah was dying, when I was falling apart, you held everything together. I did what any friend would do. No, you did what family does, more than family. Caleb leaned forward, needing her to understand. After the funeral, when I couldn't get out of bed, when Emma was crying for her mom and I had no idea how to help her, you were there. You've been there every single day since. That's not just friendship, Rachel. That's love. The word slipped out before he could stop it, hanging in the air between them. Rachel's eyes widened, her shredded napkin forgotten. What kind of love? She whispered. This was it, the moment he'd been avoiding, the conversation that could change everything. Caleb opened his mouth, the confession rising in his throat, but fear choked it back down. The kind that Emma and I depend on, the kind that I can't imagine living without. It was both the truth and a deflection, and Rachel knew it. He watched disappointment flicker across her face before she looked away, blinking rapidly. I'm thinking about taking a new job, she said abruptly, shifting gears so fast it gave him whiplash. What? There's a position in Seattle, marketing director for a tech startup. It's a huge opportunity. More money, more responsibility, more room for growth. Rachel's words came faster now, like she was trying to convince herself as much as him. My boss actually recommended me for it. They want to do a final interview next week. Seattle. 3 hours away. Far enough that Thursday museum trips would become impossible. Far enough that weekend pancakes would turn into occasional visits. Far enough that the life they'd built together would have to fundamentally change. Seattle, Caleb repeated numbly. I know it's far, but Claire's there, so at least I'd know someone. And it's not like Portland's been... She trailed off, searching for words. I've been feeling stuck lately, like I'm waiting for something that's never going to happen. Maybe this is the push I need to move forward. Something that's never going to happen. The words felt aimed directly at him, a mirror of his own cowardice. She was stuck because of him, because he'd created this limbo where neither of them could move forward. What about Emma? The question came out more desperate than he intended. You're her whole world, Rach. How am I supposed to explain that you're leaving? Rachel flinched. I wouldn't be leaving permanently. Seattle's not that far. I could visit, and you could bring Emma up on weekends. It doesn't have to be goodbye. But they both knew it would change everything. Distance had a way of dissolving the small moments that made up a relationship. The impromptu dinners, the late-night phone calls when Emma had a nightmare, the easy comfort of proximity. When do you have to decide? Caleb managed. They want an answer by the end of next week. Rachel finally looked at him again, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I needed to tell you before I made any decisions. You and Emma, you deserve to know. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me the truth. Her voice broke slightly. I want you to tell me what you're really thinking, what you're really feeling. Just once, Caleb. Give me honesty instead of deflection. The words he'd held back for years pressed against his chest, demanding release. This was his chance. Rachel was practically begging him to stop hiding, to admit what they both seemed to dance around. But the fear was stronger, the fear of rejection, of ruining what they had, of hurting Emma if things fell apart. I think you should do what's best for your career, he said carefully. You've put your life on hold long enough helping me raise Emma. You deserve to chase your dreams. It was the noble answer, the selfless answer. It was also the coward's answer, and they both knew it. Rachel's face crumpled for just a second before she composed herself. Right, of course. She stood abruptly, gathering her purse. I should get back to work. Thanks for meeting me. Rachel, wait. I'll let you know what I decide. She was already moving toward the door, not looking back. Tell Emma I'll see her Thursday, if I'm still here. Then she was gone, leaving Caleb alone at the table with 2 half-eaten sandwiches and the crushing weight of words left unsaid. He sat there for a long time after she left, his phone buzzing with work emails he couldn't bring himself to check. The lunch crowd thinned around him, the afternoon shift taking over, and still he sat, replaying the conversation in his mind. She was leaving. Rachel was leaving because he was too much of a coward to be honest with her, and he was going to let her go because that was safer than risking rejection. His phone rang, Claire's name this time. He almost didn't answer, but his sister had a way of knowing when something was wrong. You sound terrible, Claire said immediately when he picked up. What happened? Rachel's moving to Seattle. Silence on the other end, then, shit. Yeah. Did you tell her? Tell her what? Even now, even with his sister, Caleb couldn't quite admit it out loud. Oh, for God's sake, Caleb, did you tell her you're in love with her? That you have been for years? That the reason you can't move on is because you've been emotionally unavailable to anyone who isn't her? Hearing it said so bluntly made something crack in Caleb's chest. No, I didn't tell her. Why the hell not? Because what if she doesn't feel the same way? What if I tell her and she leaves anyway, and then Emma loses the most important person in her life besides me? What if I ruin everything? Claire sighed heavily. What if she does feel the same way and you're both suffering in silence? What if the reason she's leaving is because she's tired of waiting for you to wake up and see what's right in front of you? You don't know that, don't I? Caleb, I've watched you two dance around each other for years. Even before Sarah died, I could see it. The way Rachel looked at you, the way you lit up when she walked in a room. Sarah saw it too. Caleb's heart stuttered. What? Sarah mentioned it to me once, a few months before she died. She said Rachel was in love with you, and that she was grateful you had someone who would take care of you and Emma when she was gone. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. Sarah thought Rachel was in love with me? Is in love with you, Claire corrected. Present tense, and if you can't see that, you're more oblivious than I thought. Even if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, what am I supposed to do? Call her up and confess my feelings right after she told me she's leaving? That's not fair to either of us. What's not fair is letting her leave without knowing the truth. What's not fair is spending the rest of your life wondering, what if? What's not fair is teaching Emma that it's okay to hide your feelings out of fear. That last part hit home. Caleb thought about Emma, about the lessons he was teaching her through his actions. Was he showing her that love was worth fighting for, or that it was safer to stay silent? I don't know if I can do it, he admitted quietly. Then you'll lose her. Simple as that. Rachel will move to Seattle, you'll have a few awkward visits, and eventually the distance will do what your silence couldn't. It'll break whatever connection you have left. Is that what you want? No. Then figure out what you're going to say, and say it before it's too late. She deserves to know, Caleb. And honestly, so does Emma. That little girl deserves to see her father fight for something he loves instead of just surviving. After they hung up, Caleb drove home on autopilot, Claire's words echoing in his mind. He picked Emma up from school, listened to her chatter about her day, made dinner, helped with homework. The routine was comforting in its familiarity, but underneath it all was the knowledge that everything was about to change. That night, after Emma was asleep, Caleb found himself standing in his living room looking at the photos on the mantel. There was one from Emma's first birthday, Sarah holding their daughter, both of them smiling at the camera, Caleb's arm around Sarah's shoulders. It had been a good day, one of the last before Sarah's diagnosis. Next to it was a more recent photo, Emma, Rachel, and Caleb at the zoo last summer. Emma sat on Caleb's shoulders, pointing at something off camera, while Rachel laughed beside them. They looked happy. They looked like a family. Caleb picked up the frame, studying Rachel's face. Had she been in love with him even then? Were there signs he'd missed, too caught up in his own feelings to see hers? His phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Talked to Emma's teacher today. She mentioned Em's been asking questions about her mom at school. Wanted to give you a heads up. Even preparing to leave, Rachel was still looking out for them. She was still showing up, still caring, still being the person he could count on. Caleb typed back, "Thanks for letting me know. Can we talk tomorrow?" The response took a few minutes. "Sure, your place or mine?" "Mine. After Emma's asleep, 8 p.m.? I'll be there." Caleb set his phone down, his heart racing. He had 24 hours to figure out what he was going to say, how he was going to say it. 24 hours to find the courage Claire seemed to think he possessed. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Caleb tried to focus on work, on Emma, on anything other than the approaching conversation. But his mind kept drifting, rehearsing and discarding different approaches. Emma seemed to pick up on his distraction. At dinner, she pushed her peas around her plate and asked, "Is Aunt Rachel coming over tonight?" "Yes, sweetheart. She'll be here after your bedtime." "Are you going to talk about grown-up stuff?" "Probably." Emma considered this, her little face serious. "Is it about her leaving? I heard you on the phone yesterday." Caleb's heart sank. Of course she'd heard. Emma had a way of picking up on things adults thought they were hiding. "She might have to move for work, but nothing's decided yet." "I don't want her to go." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "She's my best friend." "Well, you're my best friend, but she's my other best friend. The girl one." "I know, baby. I don't want her to go either." "Then tell her to stay," Emma said with the simple logic of childhood. "Tell her we need her." "It's more complicated than that." "Why do grown-ups always say that?" Emma's frustration was palpable. "If you love someone and you don't want them to leave, you should tell them. That's what you told me when Sophie moved away last year." Out of the mouths of babes. Caleb pulled Emma into a hug, holding her tight. "You're right. You're absolutely right." Later, after Emma's bedtime routine, Caleb found her already in bed, her stuffed elephant clutched to her chest. "Daddy?" she said as he tucked her in. "Yeah, Em." "Do you love Aunt Rachel?" The question stole his breath. "Of course I do. She's family." "No, I mean like you loved Mommy. The special kind of love." Caleb sat on the edge of her bed, looking into his daughter's wise eyes. How did he answer that honestly without confusing her, without making promises he couldn't keep? "I care about Rachel very much," he said carefully. "She means the world to both of us." "That's not what I asked." Emma sat up, suddenly serious. "You get sad when she leaves, and you smile different when she's here, and you look at her the way Prince Charming looks at Cinderella in my movie." "Emma, it's okay if you do, Daddy. I think it would be nice. Then she could stay forever, and we could be a real family." The innocence of the statement broke something open in Caleb's chest. "We're already a real family, sweetheart." "I know, but we could be more real, like with Aunt Rachel here all the time, not just visiting." Emma lay back down, yawning. "You should tell her, before she leaves." "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just don't always notice." She smiled sleepily. "Night, Daddy. Good luck with the grown-up talk." Caleb kissed her forehead, turned on her nightlight, and left the room with his heart hammering. Even his 6-year-old daughter could see what he'd been trying to hide. Everyone could see it except him, or rather, he'd seen it but refused to acknowledge it. At 8 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Caleb opened it to find Rachel standing on his porch, wearing jeans and an oversized sweater, her hair down around her shoulders. She looked beautiful and nervous, and Caleb's courage nearly failed him before they'd even started. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey, come in." They settled in the living room, Rachel on the couch, Caleb in the armchair across from her. The distance felt both necessary and wrong. "So," Rachel began, "you wanted to talk?" "Yeah, about yesterday, about Seattle." Caleb took a deep breath. "I didn't react well. I should have been more supportive." "It's a big change. I get it. Do you really want to go?" The question came out before he could stop it. "Or are you running away from something here?" Rachel's eyes snapped to his. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I think you know what it means." Caleb leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. "I think we've been dancing around the same thing for years, and I think we're both tired of pretending." "Caleb, let me finish. Please." He gathered his courage, thinking of Emma's simple wisdom. Claire's frustration, Rachel's desperate plea for honesty. You asked me at the museum if I was happy. The truth is, I'm not. I haven't been since Sarah died, but not for the reasons everyone thinks. Rachel sat very still, her eyes wide and fixed on his face. I loved Sarah, Caleb continued. I want to be clear about that. She was Emma's mother, and I cared about her deeply. But our relationship wasn't what everyone thought it was. We got together young, we got pregnant accidentally, and we did our best to make it work. And when she got sick, I promised her I'd take care of Emma, and I've spent the last 3 years focused on that promise. I know how much you loved her, Rachel said quietly. But that's the thing, I did love her, but I wasn't in love with her. Not the way you're supposed to be with someone you marry. We were partners, co-parents, friends, but we weren't soulmates. Caleb's voice dropped. Because my soulmate was always someone else. The air in the room seemed to crystallize. Rachel's breath caught, her hands gripping the edge of the couch cushion. 3 years, Caleb said, his voice rough with emotion. 3 years I've been a single dad, and people keep asking why I don't date, why I don't move on. And I've given every excuse I can think of. I'm too busy, Emma needs stability, I'm not ready. All of it true, but none of it the real reason. What's the real reason? Rachel whispered. Caleb stood, unable to sit still any longer. He moved to the window, looking out at the dark street. The real reason is that I've been in love with you since we were teenagers. The real reason is that even when I was with Sarah, even when I was trying to be the partner she deserved, part of my heart belonged to you. And after she died, after you showed up and stayed and became part of our family, I fell so much deeper that I don't know how to climb back out. Silence. Heavy and complete. Caleb couldn't turn around, couldn't face whatever expression was on Rachel's face. He'd done it. He'd finally said it. And now he had to live with the consequences. Say something, he finally managed. Please. You're in love with me. Rachel's voice sounded strange, like she was testing the words. Yes. For how long? Since before Sarah. Since before Emma. Since we were kids and I didn't have words for what I was feeling. Caleb finally turned to face her, his heart in his throat. You're the reason I can't move on, Rachel. You're the reason every date feels wrong, every possibility feels empty. Because I'm comparing everyone to you, and no one measures up. Rachel stood slowly, and Caleb saw tears streaming down her face. You never said anything. I was scared. I am scared. Because if I tell you this and you don't feel the same way, I lose you. Emma loses you. And I can't. His voice broke. I can't risk that. You're too important. You absolute idiot. Rachel laughed through her tears, a sound caught between joy and frustration. You beautiful, stubborn, impossible idiot. What? But she was crossing the room, closing the distance between them with quick strides. And then her hands were on his face, pulling him down, and her lips were on his, and Caleb's entire world tilted on its axis. The kiss was everything, desperate and gentle, familiar and entirely new. Caleb wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, 3 years of restraint breaking like a dam. Rachel tasted like tears and coffee and coming home, and when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb could see his own emotions reflected in her eyes. I've been in love with you for 15 years, Rachel said, her forehead pressed against his. 15 years of watching you, wanting you, convincing myself that being your friend was enough. Do you have any idea how hard it's been? How many times I almost told you? Why didn't you? Same reason you didn't. Fear. And then you were with Sarah and I buried it because you seemed happy. And when she died, I stayed because you needed me, because Emma needed me. But God, Caleb, every time you pulled away, every time you changed the subject when I got too close, it killed me a little more. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Caleb kissed her again, softer this time. I wasted so much time. We both did. Rachel pulled back slightly, searching his face. But we can't waste any more. I need to know, is this real? Are you really ready for this, or are you just scared of me leaving? I'm terrified of you leaving, but I've wanted this, wanted you, for longer than I can remember. The fear of losing you has been the only thing holding me back. What about Emma? Emma told me tonight that I look at you the way Prince Charming looks at Cinderella. She asked if I loved you, and when I deflected, she told me I should tell you before you leave. Caleb smiled despite his tears. Our daughter is apparently smarter than both of us. Rachel laughed, a real laugh this time, and the sound filled something in Caleb he hadn't realized was empty. She really said that? She really did. She said we could be more real if you stayed forever. Forever's a long time. Is it too long? Fear crept back in, the old familiar doubt. No. Rachel kissed him again, quick and certain. It's not long enough. They stood there, wrapped in each other, the weight of years of silence finally lifted. Outside, the world continued unchanged, but inside this house, everything had shifted. The walls Caleb had built to protect his heart had finally crumbled, and standing in the ruins was the woman who'd been waiting for him all along. So, Rachel said after a long moment, I should probably call Seattle tomorrow and turn down the job. You should do what you want, Caleb said, meaning it. If Seattle is what's best for your career. Caleb Morris, if you finish that sentence, I'm going to kiss you into silence. Rachel's eyes sparkled. I don't want Seattle. I never really did. I just wanted a reason for you to ask me to stay. I wanted proof that I mattered more than your fear. You matter more than everything. Then that's settled. She smiled, running her fingers through his hair. I'm staying. We're doing this. Whatever this becomes, we're doing it together. What about Emma? We need to do this right for her sake. Agreed. Slow and careful, with her needs first. But Caleb? Rachel's expression turned serious. We're not going back to pretending. I can't do that anymore. If we're going to make this work, we have to be honest. With each other, with Emma, with ourselves. No more pretending, Caleb promised. No more silence. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet house, both of them marveling at how a single moment of courage had changed everything. Years of carefully constructed walls had fallen, and neither of them was quite sure how to navigate this new territory. But they were together, finally, and that felt like enough to start. Upstairs, Emma slept soundly, unaware that her small family had just expanded in the way she'd hoped. And for the first time in 3 years, Caleb allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, happiness wasn't something that had died with Sarah. Maybe it had been waiting patiently all along, wearing the face of his best friend, ready for him to finally be brave enough to reach for it. Rachel left that night around 11, both of them agreeing that despite everything, they needed to take things slowly for Emma's sake. But when Caleb closed the door behind her, he leaned against it with a smile he couldn't suppress, his lips still tingling from their kisses, his heart lighter than it had been in years. He'd finally done it. After all the silence, all the fear, he'd told her the truth, and she'd felt the same way. The relief should have been complete, but as he climbed the stairs to his bedroom, a small voice of doubt whispered in the back of his mind. They'd crossed a line tonight, stepped into territory that couldn't be uncrossed. What if it didn't work? What if the reality of being together couldn't live up to the years of longing? What if he'd just destroyed the one stable thing in Emma's life? Sleep came fitfully, his dreams a confused tangle of Rachel's smile and Emma's hopeful face, and Sarah's voice reminding him of his promise to put their daughter first. He woke before dawn, disoriented and anxious, reaching for his phone to find a text from Rachel sent at 2 a.m. Can't sleep. Keep replaying everything. Is this real? Did we really just do that? Caleb typed back immediately, not caring about the early hour. It's real. Are you having second thoughts? The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, no, just scared. This changes everything. It doesn't have to. We go slow like we said. Put Emma first. What if slow isn't enough? What if we mess this up? Caleb stared at the message, his own fears reflected back at him. Then we mess it up together, but I'd rather try and fail than spend the rest of my life wondering what if. A longer pause this time, then, come over for breakfast? I know it's early, but I need to see you. Need to make sure last night wasn't a dream. 20 minutes later, Caleb stood outside Rachel's apartment door, having called in a favor with his neighbor Mrs. Chen to watch Emma for a few hours. His hand shook slightly as he knocked, nervous in a way he hadn't been since he was a teenager picking up his first date. Rachel answered in pajama pants and one of Caleb's old college sweatshirts that she'd somehow acquired over the years. Her hair was messy, her face bare of makeup, and she'd never looked more beautiful to him. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." They stood there for a moment, suddenly shy with each other despite everything that had happened the night before. Then Rachel grabbed his hand and pulled him inside, closing the door and kissing him with an urgency that dissolved all his anxiety. "Okay," she breathed when they finally broke apart. "It's real. You're real. This is happening." "This is happening," Caleb confirmed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "How are you feeling about it in the light of day? Terrified? Excited? Confused?" Rachel led him to her small kitchen where coffee was already brewing. "I kept thinking about Emma, about how we tell her when we tell her. What if she doesn't understand? What if she feels betrayed that we kept this from her?" "Emma basically gave us her blessing last night," Caleb reminded her. "She's been rooting for this before we even admitted it to ourselves." "That was hypothetical. This is real. There's a difference between a 6-year-old's fairy tale and actually changing the dynamic of her entire family structure." Caleb poured them both coffee, his mind working through the implications. "So what do you want to do? We could wait, keep things quiet until we're more sure." "Are you not sure?" Rachel's voice carried a thread of vulnerability that made his chest ache. "I'm sure about wanting you. I'm sure about how I feel. I need to protect Emma. That has to come first, even before us. I know. I wouldn't love you if you felt any other way." Rachel wrapped her hands around her mug, staring into the dark liquid. "But we can't hide this from her. Kids are perceptive, and Emma especially. She'll know something's different. Then we tell her. Not everything, not all at once, but enough. We tell her that you and I care about each other, that we want to spend more time together, and we see where it goes from there." "When?" Caleb considered. "This weekend. We could do something together, all three of us, and find a natural moment to talk to her." Rachel nodded slowly, but Caleb could see the worry still etched on her face. "What are you really afraid of?" he asked gently. "That I'm not enough," she admitted, the words barely above a whisper. "That I'll never be able to fill the space Sarah left. That Emma will always see me as Aunt Rachel, not as someone who could be more." "Rachel." "Let me finish." She set down her mug, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I've been in Emma's life for 3 years as the fun aunt, the helper, the friend. But being someone's parent is different. It's responsibility and discipline and being the bad guy sometimes. What if Emma doesn't want that from me? What if trying to be more ruins what we already have?" Caleb crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "You've already been doing all of that. Every time you helped with homework, every time you set boundaries, every time you showed up when things were hard, you were being a parent. Emma already sees you that way, even if we haven't put a name to it. But I'm not her mother. I'll never be Sarah. I don't want you to be Sarah." Caleb pulled back to look at her face. Sarah was Emma's biological mother, and she'll always have that place in Emma's heart and in our history. "But there's room for you too, Rachel. There's been room for you all along. We're not replacing anyone. We're growing into something new." Rachel wiped at her eyes, managing a shaky smile. "When did you get so wise?" "About 5 hours ago when I finally stopped being an idiot." He kissed her forehead. "We'll figure this out. Together. One day at a time." They spent the morning at Rachel's apartment, talking through logistics and fears, making plans and then discarding them. It felt surreal to Caleb, this new dynamic where he could reach for Rachel's hand without overthinking it, where he could kiss her when she made a joke, where the distance he'd maintained for years no longer existed. But reality intruded when his phone rang around 10. Mrs. Chen's name flashed on the screen. "Emma's awake and asking for you," the elderly woman said when he answered. "I gave her breakfast, but she wants to know when you're coming home." "Tell her I'll be there in 20 minutes, Caleb said, feeling a pang of guilt. He'd never left Emma without telling her where he was going before. "Everything okay?" Rachel asked as he hung up. "Yeah, I just need to get back. Emma's up." He hesitated, then added, "Want to come with me? We don't have to tell her anything today, but maybe it would be good for her to see us together. Start getting used to the idea." Rachel bit her lip, considering. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure that I don't want to say goodbye to you yet, and I'm sure that sneaking around is only going to make this harder." They drove separately to Caleb's house, arriving to find Emma already outside on the front porch with Mrs. Chen, her face lighting up when she saw Rachel's car pull up behind Caleb's. "Aunt Rachel!" Emma shouted, running down the driveway. "Did you have a sleepover with Daddy?" Caleb and Rachel exchanged quick glances, both fighting smiles at Emma's innocent assumption. "Not exactly, sweetie," Rachel said, scooping Emma up. "Your dad and I had breakfast together, and he invited me to come hang out with you guys today. Is that okay?" "It's perfect." Emma wrapped her arms around Rachel's neck. "Mrs. Chen said we could make pancakes. Can you help? You make them better than Daddy." "Hey," Caleb protested in mock offense. "My pancakes are excellent." "They're okay," Emma said diplomatically, "but Aunt Rachel's are excellenter." Mrs. Chen left with a knowing smile and a pat on Caleb's arm, and the three of them headed inside. The morning unfolded with surprising ease, Rachel and Emma making an elaborate pancake breakfast while Caleb set the table, the three of them eating together and laughing at Emma's stories about a dream she'd had involving talking dinosaurs. It felt natural, domestic, right, like this was how it should have been all along. Caleb watched Rachel help Emma cut her pancakes, saw the easy affection between them, and felt his heart swell with something that felt dangerously close to complete happiness. After breakfast, Emma dragged them both outside to play in the backyard, insisting they needed to build the best fort ever out of cardboard boxes Caleb had been meaning to recycle. As they worked together, Emma chattering constantly and Rachel meeting Caleb's eyes over their daughter's head with shared smiles, Caleb felt the rightness of it settle into his bones. This was his family. It had been his family for years, even when he'd been too afraid to acknowledge it. The weekend passed in a blur of normalcy that felt anything but normal to Caleb. Rachel stayed for lunch, then dinner, then tucked Emma into bed alongside Caleb like she'd done it 100 times before. And after Emma was asleep, they sat on the couch together, Rachel's head on Caleb's shoulder, both of them marveling at how easy it felt now that they'd stopped fighting it. "We should tell her tomorrow," Rachel said quietly. "She keeps looking at us like she knows something's different. It's not fair to keep her in the dark." "Agreed. After breakfast?" "After breakfast." But Sunday morning brought an unexpected complication in the form of Caleb's mother, who showed up unannounced at 9:30 with grocery bags and a determined expression. "Surprise!" Linda Morris announced, sweeping into the house. "I was at the farmer's market and thought I'd bring you some fresh produce and, oh, Rachel, I didn't know you'd be here." The tone was friendly enough, but Caleb caught the subtle question underneath. His mother had always liked Rachel, had been grateful for her help after Sarah died, but she'd also made comments over the years about Caleb needing to move on, to find someone new. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Hi, Mrs. Morris," Rachel said, standing up from where she'd been sitting with Emma at the kitchen table. "She's having breakfast with us," Emma interrupted cheerfully. "She stayed over last night, too. Well, she didn't sleep here, but she was here really late. Daddy said they were talking about grown-up stuff." Caleb watched his mother's eyebrows rise, saw the calculation in her eyes. "I see. Well, that's lovely. The more the merrier." The next hour was excruciating. Linda busied herself putting away groceries and making subtle observations about how cozy everything seemed, while Caleb and Rachel tried to act natural and Emma remained blissfully oblivious to the undercurrents. Finally, when Linda started asking pointed questions about Rachel's plans for the future, Caleb couldn't take it anymore. "Mom, can I talk to you in the other room for a minute?" Linda followed him to his home office, closing the door with a meaningful look. "So," she said without preamble, "are you going to tell me what's going on, or do I have to guess?" "Rachel and we're seeing where things go, together, as more than friends." His mother's face broke into a wide smile. "Finally. I was beginning to think you'd never figure it out." "Wait, what?" "Oh, honey, everyone's known for years. Everyone except you two, apparently." Linda shook her head fondly. "That girl has been in love with you since you were teenagers, and you've been looking at her like she hung the moon for just as long. If everyone knew, why didn't anyone say anything? Would you have listened? You've been so wrapped up in being Sarah's widower and Emma's father that you couldn't see what was right in front of you. We all hoped you'd figure it out eventually." Caleb sank into his desk chair. overwhelmed. Even Sarah knew. Claire told me. Sarah was a smart woman. She knew Rachel would take care of you both when she couldn't. Linda's expression softened. She wanted you to be happy, Caleb. She wouldn't want you spending the rest of your life alone. I'm not sure I deserve this. Deserve Rachel. That's the grief talking. You deserve every bit of happiness you can find. His mother pulled him into a hug. Now, are you going to tell Emma, or is she going to figure it out herself? Because that child is far too perceptive for her own good. We're telling her today, actually, after you leave. No offense. None taken. I'll clear out. Linda headed for the door, then paused. Caleb, Rachel is good for you, good for Emma. Don't let fear talk you out of this. After his mother left, Caleb found Rachel and Emma in the living room, building a puzzle together. Rachel looked up with questioning eyes, and he nodded slightly. Time to do this. Em, can we talk to you about something? Caleb settled on the floor beside them. Emma's eyes went wide. Am I in trouble? No, sweetheart, not at all. We just want to tell you something important. Rachel reached for Caleb's hand, their fingers intertwining, and Emma's gaze immediately dropped to their joined hands. Are you boyfriend and girlfriend now? She asked, her voice small and uncertain. Well, Caleb started, then stopped, looking at Rachel helplessly. They'd talked about how to phrase this, but now that the moment was here, all his planned words fled. Rachel squeezed his hand and spoke directly to Emma. Your dad and I care about each other very much. We've been best friends for a long time, but recently we realized we want to be more than friends. How would you feel about that? Emma's face scrunched up in thought, her eyes moving between them. Would you move in with us? Not right away, Rachel said carefully. We want to take things slow, make sure everyone's comfortable. But maybe someday, if that's what we all want. Would I have to call you Mom? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Caleb started to intervene, but Rachel held up a hand, her eyes never leaving Emma's. No, honey, you have a mom. Her name was Sarah, and she loved you very much. I'm not trying to replace her or take her place. I'm Rachel. I'm someone who loves you and your dad, and who wants to be part of your family in whatever way feels right to you. Emma considered this, her little face serious. Can I still call you Aunt Rachel? If that's what you're comfortable with, absolutely. But maybe sometimes other things too, like when we're being fancy? Rachel laughed, tears shining in her eyes. We can figure that out as we go. There's no rush, Em. Nothing has to change if you don't want it to. But I do want things to change, Emma said with sudden conviction. She launched herself at Rachel, wrapping her small arms around her neck. I want you to stay forever. I want you to be here every morning and every night. I want us to be a real family. Caleb felt his throat tighten as he watched Rachel hold Emma, both of them crying now, years of unspoken wishes finally finding words. He wrapped his arms around both of them, and they stayed like that on the living room floor, a tangle of limbs and love and new beginnings. Later, after Emma had extracted promises of family game night and more fort building and Rachel teaching her to bake cookies, she went upstairs to play in her room, leaving Caleb and Rachel alone. That went better than I expected, Caleb said, still processing. She's an amazing kid. You've raised her to be open and honest and brave. Rachel leaned into him. Everything I'm terrified to be. What do you mean? I mean that Emma just asked for everything I want, and I'm sitting here waiting for the other shoe to drop. Waiting for you to realize this is too complicated, too messy, too risky. Caleb turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. The only risk is not trying. We've wasted enough time being afraid, Rachel. I'm done with that. I'm done pretending this isn't exactly what I want. And if it doesn't work, if we try this and it falls apart, then at least we'll know we tried. At least we'll have been honest. Isn't that better than spending the rest of our lives wondering? Rachel nodded, but Caleb could see the doubt still lingering in her eyes. He understood it, felt it himself if he was honest. They were stepping into unknown territory, risking everything comfortable and safe for the possibility of something more. The next few weeks were a careful dance of adjustment. Rachel started staying later in the evenings, joining them for dinners and bedtime routines. She kept her apartment, her own space, but gradually her presence at Caleb's house became more constant. Toothbrush in the bathroom, changes of clothes in the guest room, her favorite tea in the cabinet. Emma blossomed under the increased attention, her natural exuberance amplified by having both her favorite adults around more often. But Caleb noticed the small moments of confusion too, like when Emma asked Rachel to sign a permission slip and then looked stricken, like she'd done something wrong, or when she had a nightmare and called for both Daddy and Rachel, her voice uncertain about whether Rachel was allowed to comfort her in the middle of the night. They were navigating uncharted waters, and sometimes Caleb felt like they were all just making it up as they went along. One evening, about 3 weeks after they'd told Emma, Caleb found Rachel standing in Emma's doorway after bedtime, watching their daughter sleep. "What's wrong?" he asked quietly, coming up behind her. "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." Rachel leaned back against him. "Sometimes I look at her and I'm overwhelmed by how much I love her, how much I want to protect her. And then I remember that I'm not actually her parent, not really, and I wonder if I'm overstepping." "You're not overstepping." "But where's the line, Caleb? When does helping become interfering? When does loving her become trying to replace Sarah?" "Never. It never becomes that." He turned her to face him. "You're building something new with Emma, not replacing what she had. There's room for both." "I want to believe that." "Then believe it." He kissed her softly. "You're enough, Rachel. You've always been enough." But even as he said the words, Caleb felt his own doubts creeping in. They'd been in this comfortable bubble for weeks, playing house without actually committing to anything permanent. Rachel still had her apartment. They hadn't told most of their friends. It felt like they were waiting for permission from some external source to make this real. The bubble burst on a random Tuesday afternoon when Caleb got a call from Emma's school. She'd gotten into a fight with another student and needed to be picked up early. Caleb was in the middle of a crucial client meeting, and Rachel was the emergency contact. But when he called to give her a heads up, her phone went straight to voicemail. Panic set in as he tried again and again, finally leaving the meeting and racing to the school himself. He found Emma in the principal's office, her face tear-stained and defiant. The other child, a boy from her class, had a bloody nose and an equally upset expression. "Mr. Morris," Principal Henderson said gravely, "we need to talk about Emma's behavior." The story that emerged was both heartbreaking and infuriating. The boy, Tyler, had been teasing Emma about not having a mother. When Emma defended herself by saying she did have people who loved her, Tyler had escalated, saying that dead moms don't count and fake moms aren't real. Emma had punched him. "I'm not saying I condone violence," Caleb said carefully after hearing both sides, "but I understand why Emma reacted the way she did. Nevertheless, hitting another student is serious. Emma will need to serve detention, and I'd like to recommend some counseling sessions with our school therapist." Caleb agreed to everything, apologized to Tyler's parents, and took Emma home early. She was silent in the car, staring out the window with her arms crossed. "Want to talk about it?" Caleb finally asked. "No." "Emma, he said Aunt Rachel doesn't count because she's not really my family. He said she's just pretending to care about me." Emma's voice broke. "But she's not pretending. She loves me. She does count." Caleb pulled over, unable to drive through the sudden blur of tears. He twisted in his seat to look at his daughter. "You're absolutely right. Rachel loves you more than anything. She is your family." "Then why doesn't she live with us? Why does she still have her own apartment? If we're really a family, why doesn't she stay?" The question gutted him. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. Emma had pinpointed exactly what Caleb had been trying not to examine too closely. The fact that despite everything they'd said and promised, Rachel was still keeping one foot out the door. When they got home, Caleb called Rachel again. This time she answered, breathless and apologetic. "I'm so sorry. I was in a meeting and had my phone off. Is Emma okay? What happened?" He filled her in on the details, and Rachel arrived at the house within 20 minutes, rushing to Emma and pulling her into a fierce hug. "I'm so proud of you for defending yourself," Rachel said, "even though hitting isn't the answer. But I'm proud that you stood up for what you believe in." "Tyler said you don't count as my family because you're not my real mom and you don't live here." Emma's voice was muffled against Rachel's shoulder. Rachel's eyes met Caleb's over Emma's head, and he saw his own realization reflected there. They'd been playing it safe, testing the waters, not fully committing. And Emma was the one paying the price for their caution. Emma, Rachel said carefully, what if that changed? What if I did live here? Emma pulled back, her eyes wide. Really? You'd move in? Would you want me to? Yes, 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 yes! Emma bounced with excitement, then suddenly stopped. But what about your apartment and your stuff? Those are just things, honey. They can be moved. What matters is being with the people you love. After Emma calmed down and went to play in her room, Caleb and Rachel faced each other in the kitchen. Did you mean that? Caleb asked. About moving in? I think I did. Rachel looked almost surprised at herself. I've been holding back, keeping my apartment as some kind of safety net. But hearing Emma question whether I really count because I don't live here, it made me realize I'm sending the wrong message. To her and to you. I never wanted you to feel pressured. I don't feel pressured. I feel like I've been lying to myself. I'm here every day anyway. I'm already part of this family. The only thing keeping me from making it official is fear. Fear of what? Rachel took a deep breath. Fear that if I give up my apartment, my independence, my safety net, and then this doesn't work out, I'll have nothing, that I'll have given everything and it won't be enough. Caleb crossed to her, cupping her face in his hands. You'll never be nothing to us. Even if this whole thing crashes and burns tomorrow, which it won't, you'll still be Emma's Aunt Rachel. You'll still be family. That doesn't change based on where you sleep. How are you so sure? Because I've loved you too long to imagine a world where you're not part of our lives. The address doesn't matter, Rachel. You're already home. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she kissed him hard. Okay. Okay, I'll do it. I'll move in. Yeah? Yeah. Not tomorrow. We should do this right. Give Emma time to adjust, talk about logistics, but soon. I'll give notice on my apartment. The decision should have felt terrifying, but instead it felt like relief, like they'd finally stopped hedging their bets and committed to the truth they'd been dancing around. That night, the three of them sat down and had a real conversation about what Rachel moving in would mean. Emma had opinions about which room should be Rachel's office, where her clothes should go, how they'd arrange furniture. Her excitement was infectious, pulling both adults out of their anxiety and into the simple joy of planning a shared future. Later, after Emma was asleep, Caleb and Rachel sat on the back porch, sharing a bottle of wine and looking up at the stars. I talked to my landlord today, Rachel said. Gave my 30 days notice. It's really happening. Having second thoughts? Constantly, but I'm doing it anyway. She turned to look at him. You know what's funny? I spent 3 years being terrified that telling you how I felt would ruin everything. And now that we're doing this, I'm terrified it'll still get ruined somehow. That's just fear talking. It doesn't mean anything. Doesn't it? Caleb, we're really doing this. Moving in together, being a family. What if I'm not good at it? What if I screw it up? Then we'll figure it out together. That's what families do. They mess up and they figure it out. Rachel nodded, but Caleb could see she wasn't entirely convinced. He understood it. They were both still waiting for the moment when reality didn't live up to the dream they'd been nurturing for so long. The 30 days passed quickly, filled with packing boxes and furniture shuffling and long conversations about blending their lives. Rachel's apartment slowly emptied while Caleb's house filled up with her things, her books and art, and the small touches that made a house feel like home. Emma threw herself into the preparations with characteristic enthusiasm, helping Rachel pack and decide what to keep and what to donate. She chattered constantly about how perfect everything would be once Rachel lived with them, for real. But on the day of the actual move, something shifted. Emma woke up quiet and withdrawn, barely touching her breakfast while movers carried boxes into the house. What's wrong, sweetie? Rachel asked, crouching down beside Emma's chair. Nothing. Em, talk to us, Caleb urged. Emma's eyes filled with tears. What if my mom is sad? What if she's watching from heaven and she's sad that you're taking her place? The question hit Rachel like a physical blow. Caleb watched her face crumple before she quickly composed herself. Oh, Emma, Rachel pulled her into her lap. I'm not taking your mom's place. I could never do that. Your mom is your mom, always. Nothing can change that. But you're moving into her room, into her house. You're doing all the mom things. Caleb's heart shattered. In their excitement about moving forward, they hadn't properly addressed Emma's grief about what moving forward might mean. "Come here, both of you." He led them to the living room, to the photo on the mantel of Sarah holding baby Emma. "Your mom loved you more than anything in the world, Em. And you know what? She loved Rachel too. They were friends." "Really?" Emma sniffled. "Really? And your mom told me before she died that she was glad Rachel would be here to help take care of you. She wanted you to have people who loved you. Having Rachel here doesn't mean we're forgetting Mom. It means we're honoring what she wanted for you, to be loved and safe and happy." "Can we talk to her?" Emma asked. "To Mom? Can we tell her it's okay?" Rachel's tears flowed freely now, but she nodded. Together, the three of them stood in front of Sarah's photo, and Caleb helped Emma find the words to tell her mother about their growing family, to ask for her blessing, to promise they'd never forget her. It was messy and painful and necessary, and by the end they were all crying. But there was also a sense of peace, of Sarah's memory being honored rather than erased. The rest of the move went smoothly, and by evening Rachel's belongings were distributed throughout the house. Her books filled half the living room shelves, her clothes hung in the closet, her toiletries lined the bathroom counter. Emma insisted on a first night celebration, so they ordered pizza and ate it on the floor of the living room, surrounded by boxes. Afterward, Emma led them on a tour of the house, pointing out where everything of Rachel's now lived, claiming Rachel's presence in every room. When bedtime came, Emma hesitated at her doorway. "Will you both tuck me in? Together?" They did, each taking a side of her bed, reading her favorite story in alternating voices. Emma's eyes drooped as Caleb read the final page, and Rachel leaned down to kiss her forehead. "Good night, sweetheart," she whispered. "Good night, Rachel. I'm glad you're home." "Me too, baby. Me too." In the hallway, Caleb pulled Rachel close, both of them overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they'd just done. "We have a family," Rachel said wonderingly. "An actual, real family. We always did. Now we just all live under the same roof." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet house, both feeling the weight and the wonder of the commitment they'd made. Rachel was home. Finally, permanently home. But even in that moment of triumph, Caleb felt a whisper of the old fear. They'd made it this far, defied the odds, built something beautiful out of years of silence and longing. But the truly hard part was still ahead, learning to live together, to parent together, to be partners in every sense of the word. He pushed the fear aside and kissed Rachel's temple. "Welcome home." "It's good to be here," she whispered back. And for that night, at least, it was enough. The honeymoon period lasted exactly 2 weeks. For 14 blissful days, everything felt like a dream realized. Rachel woke up in Caleb's bed every morning, the sunrise filtering through curtains she'd helped pick out. Emma bounded into their room each day with unstoppable energy, climbing between them for morning cuddles before school. Breakfasts were chaotic and wonderful, the three of them navigating the kitchen in a dance that grew more coordinated with each passing day. But on day 15, reality began to show its edges. It started small. Rachel reorganized the pantry without asking, grouping items by type in a system that made perfect sense to her but left Caleb searching for his coffee for 10 minutes. He'd snapped at her, frustrated and running late for work, and she'd retreated with hurt in her eyes. "I was just trying to help," she'd said quietly. "I know, I'm sorry, I had a system." "I didn't know it bothered you." "It doesn't. I mean, it does, but it shouldn't. God, I sound like an ass." Caleb had run his hands through his hair, already regretting his tone. "I'm not used to this. Having someone else in my space." The words had landed wrong, making it sound like Rachel was an intruder rather than his partner. She'd left for work without kissing him goodbye, and the day had felt off-kilter from that point forward. That night they'd made up over dinner, both apologizing for being oversensitive. But it set a precedent. Little frictions began appearing in the spaces where their lives rubbed together. Rachel liked the house cooler than Caleb did. Caleb left dishes in the sink overnight while Rachel preferred to clean as she cooked. Emma picked up on the tension, becoming clingy and anxious. "Are you and Rachel fighting?" she asked Caleb one evening while Rachel was working late. No, sweetheart, we're just adjusting. It's normal when people start living together. But you're not happy. I can tell. I am happy. I promise. Growing pains are part of change, even good change. But Emma's words haunted him because they held a kernel of truth he didn't want to examine. He was happy, overwhelmingly so in many ways. But he was also discovering that living with Rachel as a partner was fundamentally different from the friendship they'd maintained for years. The stakes felt higher now. Every disagreement carried weight it hadn't before. The real trouble started 3 weeks in, on a Wednesday evening that should have been routine. Caleb came home from work to find Rachel helping Emma with homework at the kitchen table. Normal, comfortable. Exactly what he'd imagined when Rachel moved in. But Emma looked upset, her eyes red-rimmed, and there was a tension in Rachel's shoulders that set off alarm bells. "What's wrong?" Caleb asked, setting down his briefcase. "Nothing," Rachel said too quickly. "We're just working through some math problems." "I hate math," Emma wailed, pushing her workbook away. "It's stupid and hard, and Rachel keeps making me do it over." "Because you're not trying," Rachel said, her voice strained with forced patience. "You know how to do this, Emma. You're just rushing through without thinking." "I am thinking. You're just being mean about it." "Emma, that's not fair. I want Daddy to help me instead." Emma crossed her arms, her little face set in stubborn defiance. The words hit Rachel visibly, her expression crumpling before she masked it. She stood abruptly, gathering the workbook and papers. "Fine. Your dad can help you. I'll start dinner." She left the kitchen quickly, and Caleb heard the bedroom door close a moment later. He turned to Emma, who was now crying in earnest. "Sweetheart, that wasn't kind. Rachel was trying to help you." "But she was being so strict. She wouldn't let me take a break, and she kept saying I wasn't trying hard enough. And I was trying, but it's hard." Caleb pulled Emma into a hug, feeling torn. He understood both sides, Emma's frustration with difficult homework and Rachel's desire to push her to do her best. But the line between helpful and overbearing was thin, and he wasn't sure which side Rachel had landed on. He helped Emma finish her homework with a gentler approach, letting her take breaks between problems. By the time they were done, the anger had faded from Emma's face, replaced by guilt. "Is Rachel mad at me?" she asked in a small voice. "She's hurt, Em. You rejected her help pretty harshly." "I didn't mean to hurt her feelings. I was just frustrated." "I know, but sometimes when we're frustrated, we say things that hurt people we love. You should apologize." Emma nodded solemnly, and they went to find Rachel together. She was in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone without really seeing it. "Rachel?" Emma said hesitantly from the doorway. "I'm sorry I said you were mean." "You weren't mean. I was just mad at math, not at you." Rachel's face softened immediately. "Come here, honey." She opened her arms and Emma ran into them. "I'm sorry too. I was pushing you too hard. I forget sometimes that homework shouldn't feel like punishment." "It's okay. Daddy says growing pains are normal." Over Emma's head, Rachel's eyes met Caleb's, and he saw a complex mix of emotions there. Relief at Emma's apology, lingering hurt from the rejection, and something else that looked like fear. After Emma went to bed that night, Caleb found Rachel in the kitchen, aggressively cleaning counters that were already clean. "Want to talk about it?" he asked gently. "About what?" Emma apologized. "Everything's fine." "Rachel, I said it's fine, Caleb." She scrubbed harder at an invisible spot. "I overreacted. She's 6. 6-year-olds get frustrated with homework. It's not a big deal." "It is a big deal if it's bothering you this much." Rachel threw down the sponge, finally turning to face him. "You want to know what's bothering me? I don't know where I fit. I'm not her parent, but I'm also not just the fun aunt anymore. I try to help with homework, and I'm too strict. I try to set boundaries, and I'm overstepping. I'm living in this weird middle ground where I have all the responsibility but none of the authority, and I don't know how to navigate it." "You have authority. Emma respects you." "Until she doesn't want to do her math homework, and then suddenly she wants her real parent." Rachel's voice cracked. "And I get it, I do. You're her father. You've been doing this for years. But it still hurts, Caleb. It hurts to be rejected like that, to be told I'm not good enough." "She didn't say that. She didn't have to. The message was clear. When push comes to shove, I'm replaceable. You're not." Caleb crossed to her, trying to pull her into his arms, But Rachel stepped back, shaking her head. I need to feel this right now. I need to acknowledge that this is harder than I thought it would be. Moving in together is always hard at first. We knew there'd be an adjustment period. Did we? Because I feel like we were so focused on the romance of finally being together that we didn't really think through the logistics. I left my apartment, my independence, my safety net, and now I'm realizing I don't actually know what role I'm supposed to play here. The words hit Caleb like cold water. Are you saying you regret moving in? No. Maybe. I don't know. Rachel pressed her palms against her eyes. I'm saying I'm scared. I'm scared that I gave up everything for this and it's not going to work. I'm scared that Emma will never really see me as a parent. I'm scared that you'll wake up one day and realize I'm not what you thought I was. That's not going to happen. You can't promise that. Neither of us can. We're making this up as we go. And what if we're making it up wrong? Caleb felt his own fears rising to meet hers, the doubts he'd been trying to ignore suddenly demanding attention. So what do you want to do? You want to move back out? Go back to how things were? That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying, Rachel? Because I can't fix a problem if you won't tell me what it is. The problem is that I don't know if I can be what you and Emma need. The words burst out of her, sharp with frustration and fear. I'm not Sarah. I'm not Emma's biological mother. I'm just someone who loves you both and is terrified that love isn't enough. There it was. The fear that had been lurking beneath the surface since the beginning. That Rachel could never truly fill the space Sarah had left. That she'd always be second best. An approximation of what a real family should be. Love is enough, Caleb said, but even he could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Is it? Because right now it feels like we're all just playing house, pretending we know what we're doing when really we're terrified of messing up this little girl who's been through so much already. We are terrified. I'm terrified every single day that I'm screwing Emma up, that I'm not giving her what she needs, that I'm failing her somehow. But that doesn't mean we're not a real family, Rachel. Fear doesn't invalidate what we have. Rachel wiped at her eyes, her shoulders slumping with exhaustion. I know. Logically, I know that. But tonight, when Emma said she wanted you instead of me, it was like every insecurity I've ever had came rushing back. What if this doesn't work? What if 6 months from now you realize this was a mistake? The only mistake would be giving up now. Caleb risked stepping closer, and this time Rachel didn't pull away. We're 3 weeks in, Rach, 3 weeks of learning to live together after years of maintaining separate spaces. Of course it's hard. Of course there are bumps. But that doesn't mean we're failing, doesn't it? No. It means we're human. It means we're figuring it out. He cupped her face in his hands, making her look at him. I love you. Emma loves you. That hasn't changed just because you reorganized my pantry or pushed too hard on homework. We're going to mess up, both of us. But we're going to mess up together, and we're going to figure it out together. Rachel leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. I'm so scared of losing this, of losing you and Emma. You're not going to lose us. We're right here. We're not going anywhere. They held each other in the kitchen, both of them shaking slightly with the force of emotions they'd kept bottled up. The conversation should have brought relief, but Caleb felt the weight of Rachel's fears settling onto his own shoulders. Because she was right. They were making this up as they went, and there was no guarantee it would work. The next few days were careful, both of them trying too hard to be perfect. Rachel backed off on homework help, letting Caleb take the lead. Caleb made a conscious effort to include Rachel in decisions about Emma, to validate her role. Emma, sensitive to the lingering tension, became the best-behaved version of herself. But the careful choreography felt fragile, like one wrong step would shatter it all. The breaking point came the following weekend during what should have been a fun family outing. They'd planned a trip to the coast, something Emma had been excited about for weeks. But on the drive down, Emma got carsick, throwing up all over herself in the back seat. Rachel jumped into action immediately, cleaning Emma up with practiced efficiency while Caleb dealt with the car. They found a rest stop, changed Emma into clean clothes, and got back on the road. Crisis managed, teamwork successful. But when they arrived at the beach house Caleb had rented, Emma was clingy and whiny, wanting only Caleb. Every time Rachel tried to help, Emma pulled away, asking for her dad instead. Daddy, I want you to make my sandwich. Daddy, can you tie my shoes? Daddy, will you take me to the beach? Each request was another small rejection, and Caleb watched Rachel's face grow more closed off with each one. By evening, she'd retreated to the porch, staring out at the ocean with a glass of wine in hand. Caleb got Emma settled in bed early, exhausted from the day's drama, then joined Rachel outside. The sun was setting over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that should have been romantic but instead felt melancholy. "She doesn't mean anything by it," Caleb said, settling into the chair beside her. "I know. She's 6, and she was sick, and when kids feel bad, they want their primary caregiver. That's normal." "I know that too, Caleb. I'm not an idiot." Rachel's voice was flat, emotionless. "I understand child development. I understand that I can't expect to have the same bond with her that you do. I get it. Then why are you upset?" "Because understanding something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two different things." Rachel set down her wine glass with more force than necessary. "Because every time Emma chooses you over me, it reinforces what I already fear, that I'm never going to be enough, that I'm never going to be her real parent, just the person who happens to live with you." "That's not true." "Isn't it? Be honest, Caleb. Really honest. If something happened and we broke up, if this whole thing fell apart, would I still be in Emma's life? Or would I go back to being the friend who visits sometimes?" The question hung in the air between them, and Caleb realized with dawning horror that he didn't have a good answer. They'd never talked about custody, about legal protections, about what Rachel's rights would be if they separated. She'd moved in, integrated into their lives, but she had no legal standing as Emma's parent. "I don't know," he admitted quietly, and watched Rachel flinch. "At least you're honest." She stood, wrapping her arms around herself against the ocean breeze. "I left my apartment, Caleb. I left my safety net. And now I'm realizing that I have no protection if this doesn't work out. No legal rights to Emma, no claim to this family we're building. I've given everything, and I have nothing to show for it except your word that you'll keep me around. My word should be enough." "Should it? Because you told me you loved me, that you wanted this, that we were building a family. But the first time things get hard, the first time I have doubts or Emma rejects me or we can't figure out the logistics, I'm reminded that I'm the expendable one. You and Emma are the real family. I'm just the add-on." "You're not an add-on." "Jesus, Rachel, how can you even think that?" "Because I have no proof otherwise." Tears streamed down her face now, all her careful composure crumbling. "I love Emma like she's my own daughter. I would do anything for her, die for her if necessary. But in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of society, I'm nobody. I'm the girlfriend who moved in. If you decided tomorrow that this wasn't working, I'd have no say. I'd just have to leave and never see Emma again, and there's nothing I could do about it." The truth of her words hit Caleb like a punch to the gut. She was right. He hadn't thought about it from her perspective, hadn't considered how vulnerable she was in this arrangement. She'd given up her independence, her own space, her security, all based on trust and love. But trust and love didn't hold up in court. "What do you want me to do?" he asked helplessly. "Tell me how to fix this." "I don't know if you can. This is the reality of our situation, Caleb. I'm not Emma's legal parent. I have no rights to her. And unless we get married and I formally adopt her, which feels insane to even consider when we've only been living together for 3 weeks, I'm always going to be in this limbo." Marriage. The word hung between them like a flare in the darkness. They'd never talked about marriage, had barely adjusted to living together. But Rachel was right. Without that legal protection, she was vulnerable in ways he'd never fully appreciated. "Would that help?" he asked carefully. "Getting married? Making it legal?" Rachel laughed, a bitter sound. "I don't want you to propose because you feel sorry for me or because you're trying to solve a problem. I want you to propose because you can't imagine your life without me, because you want to legally bind us together because it feels right, not because I'm having a breakdown on a beach porch." "I do want that. All of it. I thought we had time. I thought we'd get through the living together phase before jumping to marriage. And maybe we do. Maybe I'm being irrational and emotional and letting my fears run away with me." Rachel sank back into her chair, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "Or maybe I'm seeing clearly for the first time since I moved in. Maybe I'm realizing that I made a huge leap of faith without thinking through the consequences. Caleb knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. Rachel, look at me. Please. She met his eyes reluctantly, and he saw all her fear and love and uncertainty reflected there. I love you, he said firmly. I love you, and I want you in my life and in Emma's life forever. Not because I'm trying to solve a problem or because I feel guilty, but because I can't imagine our family without you. You're not an add-on. You're not expendable. You're essential. Then prove it. The words were barely a whisper. Make it real. Make it legal. Give me something to hold on to besides promises and hope. Okay? Okay? Okay, I'll prove it. I'll make it real. Caleb stood, his mind racing. But I'm going to do it right. Not because you asked, not because you're scared, but because I want to, because you deserve that. Rachel stared at him, something like hope dawning in her expression. Caleb, give me a week. 1 week to show you that this is real, that you're not replaceable, that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. He kissed her softly. Do you trust me? I want to. Then trust me. 1 more week of faith, that's all I'm asking. Rachel nodded slowly, and Caleb pulled her into his arms, both of them holding tight against the fears that threatened to tear them apart. The ocean crashed against the shore below, constant and relentless, and Caleb made a silent promise to himself and to Rachel that he would find a way to make her feel secure, to give her the proof she needed that she belonged. The rest of the weekend was subdued, both of them processing their conversation. Emma picked up on the tension but seemed to sense that questions would make it worse. She was extra sweet to Rachel, unprompted, offering hugs and asking Rachel to help with small tasks. Whether she understood what she was doing or was just being her naturally empathetic self, Caleb wasn't sure. On the drive home, Emma fell asleep in the back seat, and Caleb reached across the console to take Rachel's hand. Thank you for being honest, he said quietly. For telling me how you feel instead of letting it fester. I didn't have much choice. It was either talk or explode. I'm glad you chose talking. He squeezed her hand. And I meant what I said. I'm going to prove to you that you belong here. You don't have to prove anything, Caleb. I'm struggling with the uncertainty. With not knowing if I'm really part of this family or just visiting. You're part of this family. You have been for years. We just need to make it official. Rachel turned to look at him, surprise evident on her face. Are you serious? About making it legal? Dead serious. I was an idiot for not thinking about it sooner. You deserve security, Rachel. You deserve to know that Emma is yours too, in every way that matters. Marriage is a big step. So is moving in together. So is falling in love with my best friend. We've already taken all the big steps, Rachel. This is just making official what's already true. Tears streamed down Rachel's face again, but this time they looked like relief. I love you. God, I love you so much it terrifies me. I know the feeling. Caleb brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. We're going to figure this out. Together. I promise. The week that followed was transformative. Caleb called his lawyer and asked about adoption procedures, about what Rachel would need to legally become Emma's parent. He talked to Claire, to his mother, to anyone who would listen, gathering advice and perspective. But most importantly, he watched Rachel with Emma. Really watched. He saw the way Rachel anticipated Emma's needs before Emma voiced them, the way she knew exactly how to comfort Emma after a bad dream, the way she balanced discipline with gentleness. She was already a parent in every way except legally, and it was time to acknowledge that truth. On Thursday evening, exactly 1 week after their conversation on the beach, Caleb asked Claire to take Emma for a sleepover. Emma was thrilled at the prospect of time with her aunt, chattering excitedly as Claire picked her up. Once they were alone, Caleb took Rachel's hand and led her to the living room. On the coffee table was a folder of legal documents and a small velvet box. "What's this?" Rachel asked, her voice shaking slightly. "This is me proving that you're not replaceable, that you're not just visiting." Caleb opened the folder first, showing her the adoption papers he'd started processing. "These are preliminary documents for you to legally adopt Emma. It's a long process. and we'll need to go through counseling and home studies and a million other steps. But it's the start, the official start of making you Emma's legal parent. Rachel's hands flew to her mouth, tears already falling. Caleb, and this, he continued, picking up the velvet box with shaking hands, is me asking you to be my wife. Not because you're scared, not because I'm trying to solve a problem, but because I've been in love with you since we were teenagers, and I can't imagine spending another day without making that official. He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring, a single diamond on a platinum band. Rachel gasped, her whole body trembling. Rachel Nolan, you've been my best friend, my support system, Emma's second parent, and the love of my life. You've been patient with my fear, generous with your love, and brave enough to take a chance on us. Will you marry me? Will you legally become part of this family we've built together? Rachel was crying too hard to speak, just nodding frantically. Caleb slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then pulled her into his arms. Yes, she finally managed to choke out. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. They held each other on the couch, both crying, both laughing, both overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they'd just committed to. Years of silence and fear had led to this moment, and it felt like everything finally clicking into place. I can't believe you did all this in a week, Rachel said when she could finally speak. I would have done it in a day if I could have. I should have done it weeks ago, the moment you moved in. You deserved that security from the beginning. We were both scared. We were both protecting ourselves. I'm done being scared, Caleb said firmly. I'm done letting fear make my decisions. I want this. You, Emma, our family. I want all of it, officially and permanently. Rachel kissed him deeply, pouring 3 years of longing and love and relief into it. When they broke apart, she was smiling through her tears. Emma's going to freak out when we tell her. In a good way, I hope. The best way. She's been asking when you were going to give me a ring. 6-year-olds don't miss anything. They spent the rest of the evening talking about logistics, about timelines, about how they'd tell Emma and their families. But underneath all the practical discussions was a current of pure joy, the feeling of finally being on solid ground. The uncertainty hadn't disappeared completely. They still had to navigate the adoption process, plan a wedding, continue learning to live together as partners and parents. But the fear that had dominated their relationship for so long had loosened its grip. They'd chosen each other, officially and irrevocably, and that choice made everything else feel manageable. When Claire brought Emma home the next morning, they sat her down together at the kitchen table. Emma, we have some exciting news, Caleb started, but Emma cut him off. Rachel's wearing a ring. Does that mean you're getting married? Rachel laughed, holding up her hand so Emma could see. Yes, sweetheart. Your dad asked me to marry him, and I said yes. Emma screamed with delight, launching herself at Rachel. You're going to be my mom? My real mom? Well, legally, yes, but you can call me whatever feels right to you. I'm not trying to replace your birth mom. I know that. But I can have 2 moms, right? One in heaven and one here with me? Rachel's eyes filled with tears again. Yes, honey. You can absolutely have 2 moms. And we're going to be a real family. Forever? Forever, Caleb confirmed, pulling both of them into a hug. We're already a real family, Em. We're just making it official. Emma pulled back, her face serious. Can I be in the wedding? And can I call Rachel Mom if I want to? And can we get a dog? One thing at a time, Rachel laughed. But yes, and we'll talk about it. The morning dissolved into excitement and planning. Emma full of ideas for the wedding and what she'd wear and whether there would be cake. Her joy was infectious, pulling both adults out of their lingering fears and into the simple happiness of the moment. Later, when Emma was playing in her room, Caleb found Rachel standing in front of the mantel, looking at the photo of Sarah holding baby Emma. You okay? He asked, coming up behind her. Yeah, just thinking about her, about what she'd think of all this. She'd be happy. Claire told me. Sarah knew you loved me. She was glad you'd be here for Emma. I hope so, Ed. Rachel leaned back against him. I hope she knows I'm not trying to erase her memory. I'm just trying to love her daughter the best way I know how. You're doing more than that. You're giving Emma something Sarah wanted her to have, a complete family, with people who love her unconditionally. Rachel turned in his arms, looking up at him with eyes that still held traces of fear, but were filled mostly with love. Thank you for not giving up on us, for pushing through all my doubts and insecurities. Thank you for being brave enough to voice them, for not letting fear keep us silent anymore. They stood there together in front of the photo that represented both their past and their future, finally at peace with the choices they'd made. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Adoption processes rarely were, and blending a family took work and patience and grace. But they were committed now, legally and emotionally, to seeing it through together. Two fears had dominated their relationship for so long: Caleb's fear of losing Rachel and Rachel's fear of never being enough. But in facing those fears head-on, in choosing vulnerability over safety, they'd discovered a truth that transcended both. Love, when it was honest and committed and brave, was always enough. It didn't erase the fear completely, but it made the fear worth facing. And for the first time since Sarah's death, Caleb allowed himself to believe that happiness wasn't something that had ended 3 years ago. It was something that was just beginning, built on a foundation of friendship, tested by grief, and finally brought into the light where it belonged. The engagement should have solved everything. In fairy tales, the proposal was the happy ending, the moment where all conflicts dissolved into wedding planning and blissful certainty. But real life, Caleb was learning, didn't follow fairy tale logic. The ring on Rachel's finger was a promise, but it didn't erase the practical realities of blending a family or the emotional landmines they'd have to navigate together. The first challenge came 2 weeks after the proposal, when Rachel's job offered her a promotion that would require occasional travel to their Seattle office. It was the opportunity she'd turned down months ago, repackaged with better terms and more flexibility. Over dinner one night, after Emma had gone to bed, Rachel broached the subject with obvious trepidation. "I want to talk to you about something, and I need you to really listen before you respond," she started, twisting the engagement ring around her finger, a nervous habit she'd already developed. Caleb set down his fork, giving her his full attention. "I'm listening. The marketing director position, the one in Seattle that I turned down, they've restructured it. Now it would be based here in Portland with travel to Seattle maybe once or twice a month. Better pay, more responsibility, room for growth." She paused, watching his face. "I want to take it." His first instinct was resistance. Travel meant nights away from Emma, disruption to their still fragile routine, time apart when they were just learning to be together. But he swallowed those knee-jerk reactions, remembering Rachel's words from the beach about giving up everything for their family. "Tell me why you want it," he said instead. Rachel's shoulders relaxed slightly at his tone. "Because I'm good at this work, and I want to grow. Because I don't want to be the person who gave up her career ambitions for a relationship. Because I need to know I can be Emma's mom and your partner and still be Rachel with her own professional identity." Her voice grew stronger. "I love our family, Caleb, but I can't lose myself in it. I won't be any good to you or Emma if I do." The honesty in her words cut through his selfish desire to keep her close. This was part of what he loved about Rachel: her drive, her ambition, her refusal to shrink herself to fit someone else's expectations. If he asked her to turn this down, he'd be asking her to be less than she was. "You should take it," he said, meaning it. "Emma and I will manage a few nights a month without you, and honestly, it might be good for all of us. Give us space to miss each other, to appreciate what we have." "Really? You're not just saying that?" "Really. I'm terrified of it, if I'm honest, but I'm more terrified of you resenting us for holding you back." Caleb reached across the table for her hand. "We're partners, Rachel. That means supporting each other's growth, even when it's uncomfortable." Relief flooded Rachel's face, followed quickly by tears. "I was so scared you'd ask me to turn it down, that it would be proof I was right about having to choose between my career and this family." "You don't have to choose. We'll make it work. That's what families do." Rachel accepted the position, and 3 weeks later, she took her first trip to Seattle. Caleb and Emma drove her to the airport, Emma clinging to Rachel's neck with dramatic desperation. "It's only 2 nights, sweetheart," Rachel said gently, stroking Emma's hair. "I'll be back before you know it." "But what if you forget about us? What if Seattle is better and you don't come home?" The question hit both adults in the chest. Rachel knelt down to Emma's level, her hands on Emma's shoulders. Emma Morris, I could never forget about you. You and your dad are my home. Seattle is just a place I'm going for work. My heart stays here with you. Promise? I promise. Cross my heart. Rachel made an exaggerated X over her chest, and Emma giggled despite her tears. Watching them say goodbye, Caleb felt his own anxiety about Rachel's absence war with pride at how far they'd all come. 6 months ago, this conversation would have been impossible. Now it was just the new normal they were learning to navigate. The 2 days without Rachel were harder than Caleb expected. Not because he and Emma couldn't manage, they'd been a team for years before Rachel moved in, but because her absence left a gap that was impossible to ignore. The house felt quieter. Dinner felt incomplete. Bedtime took twice as long without Rachel's help. Emma felt it too, asking repeatedly when Rachel would be home, double-checking that she was really coming back. On the second night, she had a nightmare and called for Rachel before remembering she wasn't there. Caleb held his sobbing daughter, feeling helpless and grateful in equal measure. Helpless because he couldn't fix this particular hurt, grateful because Emma's grief over Rachel's absence was proof of how deeply she loved her. When Rachel's flight landed on Friday evening, they were both waiting at arrivals with a homemade sign Emma had insisted on making. "Welcome home, Mom," it read in Emma's careful printing, decorated with hearts and flowers and stick figures of their family. Rachel emerged from security, spotted the sign, and burst into tears right there in the terminal. She dropped her carry-on and ran to them, scooping Emma up and reaching for Caleb simultaneously. "I missed you so much," she said into Emma's hair. "Both of you. So much." "Did you see the sign?" Emma asked proudly. "I called you Mom on it." Rachel pulled back to look at the poster, her eyes scanning the words and drawings. When she looked back at Emma, her face was radiant with joy and disbelief. "You called me Mom. Is that okay? Daddy said I could if I wanted to, and I wanted to. You're my mom now, right? When you adopt me?" "I'm your mom now," Rachel confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. "The adoption just makes it legal, but you're already mine, Emma. You've been mine for a long time." Caleb watched this exchange with a lump in his throat, marveling at the resilience of his daughter and the woman who'd chosen to love them both. The 2 days apart had been hard, but they'd also been necessary, proof that their family could flex and bend without breaking, that Rachel's presence was essential but not fragile. The adoption process proved more complex than any of them anticipated. There were home studies and background checks, psychological evaluations, and family counseling sessions. Every step felt invasive, like strangers were picking apart their family to determine if it was worthy of legal recognition. The hardest part was the mandatory counseling with Emma, where a child psychologist asked her detailed questions about her feelings regarding Rachel, about her memories of Sarah, about whether she felt pressured to accept Rachel as her mother. Caleb and Rachel weren't allowed in the room during these sessions, and the waiting was agonizing. "What if she tells them she doesn't really want this?" Rachel asked during one particularly long session, pacing the waiting room like a caged animal. "What if under pressure from a stranger, she says she's not ready?" "Then we'll respect that and try again later," Caleb said, though his own stomach was in knots. But Emma knows her own mind. She'll tell them the truth. When Emma finally emerged, she ran straight to Rachel and wrapped her arms around her waist. "The lady asked me a bunch of questions, but I told her the truth. I told her you're already my mom in my heart, and we're just making it official for the paperwork people." The psychologist smiled as she approached them. "Emma is remarkably well-adjusted and clear about her feelings. I'll be recommending approval for the adoption to proceed." The relief was overwhelming. Rachel sat down hard in the nearest chair, pulling Emma onto her lap, both of them crying happy tears. Caleb felt his own eyes burning as he watched them, thinking about how far they'd all come from that night when he'd finally admitted his feelings. But even with the adoption moving forward, there were still moments of doubt and difficulty. Planning the wedding became a source of unexpected stress, with Rachel wanting something small and intimate while Emma lobbied hard for a princess-themed extravaganza. Caleb found himself mediating between his fiancée and his daughter, trying to find compromises that satisfied everyone. "I just want it to feel authentic to us," Rachel explained one evening after Emma had shown them yet another picture of an elaborate cake with a castle on top. "Not like we're putting on a show for other people." "But it's a wedding!" Emma protested. "Weddings are supposed to be fancy and magical." "They can be magical without being over the top, Em," Caleb tried, but Emma's bottom lip was already trembling. "You don't want it to be special. You don't think marrying Rachel is special enough for a princess wedding." The accusation was so off base it would have been funny if Emma wasn't genuinely upset. Rachel knelt down beside her, tilting Emma's chin up gently. "Emma, sweetheart, marrying your dad and officially becoming your mom is the most special thing I've ever done. But the wedding is just one day. What matters is all the days that come after, waking up together, having breakfast together, being a family together. I don't need a castle cake to know that's magical. But don't you want people to see how special it is? The people who matter already know, your dad, you, your grandparents, Aunt Claire. We don't need to prove anything to anyone else." Emma considered this, her face scrunched in thought. "Can we still have a nice cake, though? Not a castle, but nice?" "We can have the nicest cake that's not a castle," Rachel promised, and Emma giggled. They eventually settled on a compromise, a small ceremony in Caleb's backyard with close family and friends, followed by a casual reception with good food and a very nice 3-tier cake that Emma helped design. The planning brought them together rather than driving them apart, each decision a negotiation that taught them more about communication and compromise. 3 months after the proposal, on a Saturday in late spring, they stood in their backyard surrounded by the people who mattered most. Emma served as both flower girl and junior bridesmaid, wearing a dress she'd picked out herself that was fancy enough to satisfy her princess dreams without overwhelming Rachel's desire for simplicity. Claire stood as Rachel's maid of honor, and Caleb's best friend from college served as best man. Linda Morris cried through the entire ceremony, and even Caleb's typically stoic father had to wipe his eyes when Emma presented Rachel with a small locket containing photos of both Sarah and Rachel. "You're both my moms," Emma said solemnly as Rachel opened the locket with shaking hands. "One in heaven watching over me and one here taking care of me. I'm lucky to have two." The ceremony itself was simple but profound. Caleb and Rachel had written their own vows, and when it came time to speak them, Caleb found himself struggling to get the words out around the emotion in his throat. "Rachel, you've been my best friend for over half my life. You've seen me at my worst and somehow still chose to love me. You held me together when I was falling apart, loved my daughter like she was your own, and had the courage to call me out when I was too afraid to be honest about my feelings." He paused, looking into her eyes. "I wasted so many years being scared of losing you, scared of ruining our friendship, scared that what I felt wasn't enough. But loving you has taught me that fear only has the power we give it. Today I'm choosing love over fear. I'm choosing honesty over silence. I'm choosing you, Rachel Nolan, for today and every day after." Rachel's vows were equally emotional, her voice breaking multiple times as she spoke. "Caleb Morris, you've made me braver than I ever thought I could be. You taught me that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real, that family doesn't have to follow a traditional path to be valid, that showing up every day matters more than grand gestures. You gave me the greatest gift when you trusted me with Emma's heart." She turned to include Emma in her gaze. "I promise to love you both fiercely and honestly. I promise to choose this family every single day. I promise that when things get hard, and they will get hard, I won't run. I'll stay, and we'll figure it out together." When the officiant pronounced them married, Emma cheered louder than anyone, and the three of them shared a family hug before Caleb kissed Rachel properly, sealing the promises they'd made. The reception was everything Caleb had hoped for, relaxed and joyful, full of laughter and good food, and people who genuinely cared about their family. Emma danced with abandon, pulling both her parents onto the makeshift dance floor repeatedly. At one point, she insisted that all three of them dance together, and Caleb held Rachel close while Emma bounced between them, the picture of pure happiness. As the sun set and guests began to leave, Caleb found a quiet moment with Rachel on the porch. Emma was inside showing the cake to her grandmother, her voice carrying through the open windows. "We did it," Rachel said softly, leaning against him. "We actually did it." "Did you doubt we would?" "Every single day until about 10 minutes ago." She laughed, the sound tired but content. "Even walking down that aisle, part of me was waiting for someone to object, to point out all the reasons this wouldn't work. And now?" Now I'm choosing to believe what we promised each other, that we're in this together, for better or worse, in sickness and health, all those traditional words that feel a lot less traditional when you really mean them. Caleb kissed her temple, breathing in the moment. Claire told me once that Sarah knew you were in love with me, that she was glad you'd be here to take care of us. Did she really? Yeah. I think she'd be happy about today. Not that we needed her permission, but I think she'd see what we've built and be glad Emma has you. Rachel was quiet for a moment, then said, I've been thinking about what Emma said, about having two moms. It's such a mature way to look at it, don't you think? She's not erasing Sarah by loving me. She's just expanding her definition of family. Kids understand things adults complicate. Emma knows love isn't finite, that loving you doesn't mean she loves Sarah less. We're the ones who struggle with that concept. Not anymore, Rachel said firmly. I'm done struggling with whether I'm enough or whether I belong. Today made it official, but the truth is I've been enough all along. We've been a family for years. We just needed to believe it. The adoption was finalized 2 months after the wedding, on a sunny morning in July. The courthouse ceremony was shorter than the wedding, but somehow more profound, the moment when a judge declared Rachel to be Emma's legal parent, carrying a weight that left all three of them in tears. Walking out of the courthouse with the official papers, Emma between them holding both their hands, Caleb felt a sense of completion he'd been missing since Sarah's death. His family was whole again, not in the same way it had been before, but in a new configuration that honored the past while embracing the future. Can we go get ice cream to celebrate? Emma asked, swinging their joined hands. Absolutely, Rachel said. What flavor are you thinking? All of them. I want to try all of them because I'm happy about everything. They ended up at their favorite ice cream shop, the same one where Caleb and Rachel used to bring Emma after hard days when she was younger. Emma ordered a sampler with 6 different flavors, her eyes bigger than her stomach, while Caleb and Rachel shared a sundae. You know what I was thinking about? Rachel said, watching Emma devour her ice cream. That first night when you finally told me how you felt. I was so terrified that I'd ruined everything by pushing too hard with my questions about dating. I was terrified you'd reject me and I'd lose everything that mattered. Oh, we wasted so much energy being afraid of the wrong things, afraid of honesty, afraid of change, afraid of wanting more than what we had. Rachel licked ice cream off her spoon thoughtfully, but the thing we should have been afraid of was staying silent. That would have been the real tragedy. No more silence, Caleb promised, about anything, even when it's hard, even when it's scary. Especially when it's hard and scary, Rachel corrected. That's when communication matters most. Emma looked up from her ice cream, her face serious despite the chocolate smudged on her chin. Are you guys making more promises? Because you already did that at the wedding and at the courthouse. How many promises do you need? As many as it takes, Caleb said, reaching over to wipe her face with a napkin. The important ones are worth repeating. Okay, well, I have a promise too. Emma straightened in her seat, trying to look formal despite the ice cream disaster. I promise to be good at having 2 parents who aren't fighting about who's really my mom. And I promise to tell you when I'm sad about Mom Sarah, even if it might make you feel bad. And I promise to eat my vegetables most of the time, but not all of the time because that's unrealistic. Both adults laughed, and Rachel pulled Emma into a sticky hug. Those are excellent promises, Em. We accept all of them, including the vegetable clause. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Rachel's job required occasional travel, but they developed systems that made it manageable. Caleb and Emma had their routines for when Rachel was away, and the reunions when she returned were sweet enough to make the separations worthwhile. Emma started calling Rachel Mom consistently, though sometimes she still used Aunt Rachel when telling stories about the past, a verbal acknowledgement of the journey they'd taken together. School brought new challenges as Emma got older and other kids asked questions about her family structure. She handled it with remarkable grace, explaining matter-of-factly that her birth mom had died and her other mom had adopted her. And yes, she was lucky to have 2 dads. Wait, no, 1 dad and 2 moms, 1 living and 1 in heaven. The complications that adults stumbled over, Emma navigated with the simple confidence of a child who knew she was loved. On their first anniversary, Caleb and Rachel dropped Emma off with Linda for the weekend and escaped to the coast, back to the same beach house where they'd had their breaking point conversation a year earlier. It felt fitting to return to the place where they'd almost fallen apart, to stand on the same porch where Rachel had demanded proof that she belonged. "Remember how terrified we were?" Rachel said, looking out at the ocean. "How close we came to giving up before we really started. I remember thinking I might lose you, and that fear was worse than any fear I'd ever felt. Worse than when Sarah was dying, which sounds terrible to admit. It's not terrible, it's honest. You'd already lost Sarah by the time she died, but losing me would have been a choice, a failure to fight for what we both wanted." Caleb wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I'm glad we fought. I'm glad you pushed me to be honest even when I was terrified. I'm glad you proved to me that I belonged. That you didn't just say it, you made it legal and real and permanent." Rachel turned in his arms to face him. "Do you ever regret it? Taking the risk, disrupting the safe friendship we had?" "Never. Not once. Do you?" "Not even a little bit. Well, maybe occasionally when you leave your socks on the bathroom floor, but otherwise never." They laughed, and Caleb kissed her, tasting salt air and possibility. A year ago, they'd stood on this porch afraid of losing everything. Now they stood here having gained more than either of them had dared to hope for. The weekend was a reminder of why they worked. The easy companionship that had been the foundation of their relationship, now deepened by intimacy and commitment. They talked about everything and nothing, made plans for the future, reflected on how far they'd come. No topic was off limits, no fear too scary to voice. "I want to have another baby," Rachel said on their last night, the words spilling out quickly like she'd been holding them in. "With you. I want Emma to have a sibling, and I want to experience pregnancy and birth, and I know it's complicated with the age gap and Emma's adjustment and a million other things, but—" Caleb kissed her quiet, then pulled back with a grin. "Yes." "Yes? Just like that?" "Just like that. I've been thinking about it too, but I was afraid to bring it up. Afraid you'd think I was asking for too much when you'd already given me everything." "You're not asking. I'm offering. I want this, Caleb. I want to build our family even bigger." They spent the rest of the night talking logistics and timelines, excitement building as they planned this next chapter. By the time they returned home to Emma, they'd decided to start trying immediately, both of them giddy with the possibility. Emma's reaction when they told her was characteristically enthusiastic. "A baby! Can I teach it everything? Can I pick the name? Will it sleep in my room?" "Slow down," Caleb laughed. "First we have to actually make a baby, which might take a while." "How long?" "Could be months, could be longer. Making babies isn't something you can schedule exactly." But the universe had other plans. 6 weeks later, Rachel was staring at a positive pregnancy test with shaking hands, unable to quite believe it had happened so quickly. She and Caleb had agreed to wait a few months before telling Emma, not wanting to get her hopes up in case of early complications. The secrecy was simultaneously thrilling and difficult. Rachel dealt with morning sickness by claiming a stomach bug, and Caleb found himself lying to his daughter for the first time in recent memory, covering for Rachel's sudden food aversions and frequent naps. At 12 weeks, after confirming via ultrasound that everything looked healthy, they sat Emma down for another family meeting. "Emma, you know how you've been asking about having a baby brother or sister?" Rachel started, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. Emma's eyes went wide. "Are you pregnant? Is there a baby in your belly right now?" "There is," Rachel confirmed, and Emma screamed with delight, launching herself at Rachel's middle before Caleb could warn her to be gentle. "When do we get it? Is it a boy or a girl? Can I feel it kick? What should we name it?" The questions poured out faster than they could answer them, but both adults were laughing, caught up in Emma's infectious joy. They showed her the ultrasound pictures, explaining that the baby was still very tiny, the size of a lime, and wouldn't start kicking for a few more months. "I'm going to be the best big sister," Emma declared solemnly. "I'm going to teach the baby everything I know about dinosaurs and math and being brave." As Rachel's pregnancy progressed, their family dynamic shifted again to accommodate this new development. Emma took her role as big sister in training seriously, reading books about babies and helping prepare the nursery. Caleb found himself falling in love with Rachel all over again, watching her body change and feeling their baby move beneath his hands. The pregnancy wasn't without challenges. Rachel's morning sickness persisted well into the second trimester, and there were moments of fear. A bleeding scare at 18 weeks that sent them rushing to the emergency room. Braxton Hicks contractions that started too early and required bed rest. But they navigated each challenge together, their communication skills hard-won from earlier struggles, making them better equipped to handle stress. On a snowy February morning, Rachel went into labor 3 days before her due date. Caleb's mother came to stay with Emma while they headed to the hospital, Emma hugging Rachel fiercely and making her promise to call as soon as the baby arrived. Labor was long and difficult, Rachel's strength tested in ways she'd never experienced. Caleb stayed by her side through all of it, holding her hand, feeding her ice chips, reminding her to breathe. Watching her bring their child into the world, seeing the fierce determination on her face, he fell even deeper in love with this woman who'd chosen his daughter and then given him another child. At 4:47 p.m., after 16 hours of labor, their son was born. 7 pounds, 9 ounces of perfect, screaming humanity. Rachel sobbed as they placed him on her chest, and Caleb couldn't stop touching them both, overwhelmed by the miracle of this moment. "Hi, baby," Rachel whispered to their son. "Hi, sweet boy. We've been waiting for you." "He's perfect," Caleb managed through his own tears. "You're perfect, both of you." They named him Nathan, after Caleb's grandfather, with the middle name James, after Rachel's father. When Emma met her baby brother a few hours later, she approached with unusual solemnity, peering into Rachel's arms with wide eyes. "He's so tiny," she breathed, "and red. Is he supposed to be red?" "All babies are red when they're first born," Rachel assured her. "He'll pinken up in a few days. Want to hold him?" Emma nodded eagerly, and Caleb helped her settle into a chair before carefully placing Nathan in her arms. She stared down at her brother with an expression of absolute wonder. "Hi, Nathan. I'm Emma, your big sister. I've been waiting forever to meet you." She looked up at Caleb and Rachel. "He's the best present ever, better than the castle cake I didn't get." They all laughed, the sound mixing with Nathan's small, mewling cries, and Caleb looked around at his family, his wife, his daughter, his son, and felt a completeness he'd never thought possible after Sarah's death. The first months with a newborn were exhausting in ways Caleb had forgotten since Emma's infancy. Nathan was a colicky baby, crying for hours each evening, and juggling an infant and a 7-year-old proved challenging. But they worked as a team, trading off night feedings and early morning diaper changes, supporting each other through the sleep deprivation and stress. Emma was remarkably helpful, entertaining Nathan when he was awake and alert, running to get diapers and wipes, singing him lullabies she made up herself. There were moments of sibling jealousy, times when Emma acted out because she felt overlooked, but Rachel and Caleb were careful to carve out special time just for Emma, to remind her that Nathan's arrival didn't diminish their love for her. On Nathan's first birthday, they threw a small party in the backyard, the same space where Caleb and Rachel had married 2 years earlier. Emma helped blow out Nathan's candles since he was too young to understand, and the family photos from that day showed 4 people bound together by love and choice and persistence. Later, after guests had left and both children were asleep, Caleb and Rachel sat on the back porch with glasses of wine, surveying the remnants of the party. 3 years ago, I was sitting alone in this house, terrified to tell you how I felt, Caleb mused. And now look at us. Married, 2 kids, a life I couldn't have imagined, even in my wildest dreams. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we'd stayed silent? If neither of us had been brave enough to speak up? All the time. I think about how close we came to missing all of this because we were too scared to risk what we had. Caleb reached for Rachel's hand, their fingers intertwining automatically. But we didn't stay silent. You pushed me, to be honest, and I finally found the courage to tell you the truth. We both found courage. That's what love does. It makes you braver than you thought you could be. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of their neighborhood settling into evening. Inside, their children slept peacefully, safe and loved. The house that had once echoed with loneliness now rang with laughter and chaos and the beautiful noise of family. "You know what Emma said to me the other day?" Rachel said softly. "She said she was glad Mom Sarah died so that I could be her mom instead." Then she immediately felt terrible about it and started crying, worried she'd betrayed Sarah's memory. Caleb's heart clenched. What did you tell her? I told her that Sarah loved her enough to want her to be happy, even if that happiness came in ways Sarah couldn't be part of. That it's okay to be glad about our family while also missing the mother who came before me. That love isn't a betrayal, it's a tribute to how well Sarah loved her, that Emma's heart is big enough for both of us. That was perfect. I hope so. Parenting is mostly just hoping you're not screwing them up too badly, isn't it? Caleb laughed. Pretty much. But I think we're doing okay. Better than okay. Emma's happy, well-adjusted, secure in being loved. Nathan's too young to be messed up yet. We've got time. And each other, Rachel added. That's the difference this time. When you were raising Emma alone after Sarah died, you were doing it without a true partner. Now we share the load, share the worry, share the victories. Best decision I ever made, telling you I loved you. Second best, Rachel corrected. The best decision was being brave enough to face your fears instead of letting them control you. Telling me was just the natural result of that courage. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Caleb reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Years of silence and unspoken longing, followed by messy honesty and difficult adjustments. The fear of losing what they had almost kept them from gaining what they needed. But they'd pushed through, choosing vulnerability over safety, truth over comfort. He thought about the question Rachel had asked him years ago, the one that had started everything. Why don't you have a girlfriend? At the time, it had felt impossible to answer honestly. Now the answer was obvious. He didn't have a girlfriend because he had a wife, a partner, a co-parent, a best friend who'd become the love of his life. Inside the house, Nathan started crying, his wails carrying through the baby monitor. Rachel started to stand, but Caleb waved her back down. I've got him. You rest. He found Nathan standing in his crib, tears streaming down his chubby cheeks, reaching up with desperate arms. Caleb scooped him up, feeling the familiar weight of his son settle against his chest. Nathan's cries quieted immediately, replaced by hiccuping sniffles. Hey, buddy, bad dream? Nathan didn't answer, just burrowed closer, his tiny fist grabbing Caleb's shirt. Caleb walked slow circles around the nursery, rubbing Nathan's back, humming softly. Through the open door, he could see into Emma's room, where his daughter slept surrounded by stuffed animals and books, her nightlight casting soft shadows. 2 children, a wife. A family built from grief and hope and the courage to speak truth after years of silence. Caleb had spent so long after Sarah's death just surviving, putting one foot in front of the other for Emma's sake. He'd convinced himself that survival was enough, that asking for more was selfish. But Rachel had shown him that survival and living were different things, that he deserved happiness even as a single dad carrying the weight of loss. And in choosing to reach for that happiness, in finally admitting what his heart had known for years, he hadn't complicated his life as a single father. He'd given it meaning beyond mere survival. He'd shown Emma that love was worth the risk, that honesty was more important than comfort, that family could be built and rebuilt in ways that honored the past while embracing the future. Nathan's breathing deepened against Caleb's chest, sleep reclaiming him. Caleb lowered him gently back into the crib, covering him with his favorite blanket. For a moment, he just stood there, looking down at his son, marveling at the miracle of this life they'd created. Back on the porch, Rachel had pulled out her phone and was scrolling through photos, their wedding day, Emma meeting Nathan for the first time, the 4 of them at the park last weekend, a visual chronicle of the family they'd built together. Look at this one, she said as Caleb rejoined her, showing him a candid shot of Emma and Nathan on the living room floor. Emma was making funny faces while Nathan laughed his belly laugh, both of them caught in a moment of pure joy. This is what we fought for, this right here. No regrets? Not a single one. You? Caleb pulled Rachel close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, feeling her warmth against his side. My only regret is that I wasted so much time being afraid. But everything after that? Every risk we took, every honest conversation, every difficult adjustment, I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the colic, the sleepless nights, the time Emma painted the dog blue? We don't have a dog. Exactly. Because she painted him blue and we had to rehome him. Caleb laughed, the sound carrying across their backyard. Even the blue dog incident, all of it, because it led us here. They sat together until the wine was gone and the night had grown cool, talking about everything and nothing, making plans and sharing dreams. Eventually, they headed inside to check on the children one more time before bed, a routine they'd developed without conscious thought. Emma was still sleeping peacefully, her face relaxed in slumber. Rachel tucked the blanket more securely around her, then paused to look at the photos on Emma's nightstand. Sarah holding baby Emma in the hospital, Rachel and Emma at the zoo, and a new one from Nathan's birthday party showing their entire family together. "She keeps Sarah's photo right next to ours," Rachel observed softly. "I love that about her, the way she holds space for all the people who love her." "She learned that from you," Caleb said. "The way you talked about Sarah, the way you made room for her memory instead of trying to compete with it, that taught Emma that love doesn't have to be exclusive, that there's room for everyone." In Nathan's room, their son slept with his arms flung above his head, completely at peace. Caleb and Rachel stood together over the crib, watching him breathe, both thinking about the future this child represented. A future they'd built together, deliberately and with hard-won honesty. Finally, they retreated to their own bedroom, the house quiet around them. As they got ready for bed, following the familiar routine of a couple who'd learned each other's rhythms, Caleb caught sight of their reflection in the mirror. Two people who'd known each other most of their lives, who'd navigated friendship and loss and love and fear to arrive at this moment of domestic peace. "Thank you," he said suddenly. Rachel looked up from washing her face. "For what?" "For asking me that question 3 years ago. For pushing me to be honest when I was too scared to do it myself. For loving Emma before you loved me. For taking a chance on us even when it meant giving up your safety net. For all of it." Rachel crossed to him, still in her pajamas with her face half washed, and kissed him thoroughly. "Thank you for finally answering honestly. For being brave enough to risk everything for the possibility of something more. For showing me that I was enough, that I belonged, that this family was as much mine as yours." They finished getting ready and climbed into bed, their bodies finding each other in the dark with practiced ease. Outside, the world continued spinning, indifferent to their small triumph. But inside this house, inside this room, inside this embrace, was everything that mattered. "I love you," Caleb whispered into Rachel's hair. "I love you too. Always have. Probably always will." "Probably?" Rachel laughed softly. "Definitely. Forever and always, with all the chaos and mess and beautiful imperfection that comes with it." As sleep claimed them, Caleb's last coherent thought was about courage, how it had taken years to find it, how it had transformed everything when he finally did. He'd been a single dad for so long, carrying that identity like armor against the world. But Rachel had shown him that being a single dad didn't mean being alone, didn't mean closing his heart off from love. In choosing to love again, in admitting to Rachel what he'd buried for so long, he hadn't complicated his life, he'd completed it. And in that completion was a truth that had eluded him for years. The greatest gift he could give Emma wasn't protection from loss or change, but the example of a father brave enough to reach for happiness, honest enough to speak his truth, and wise enough to know that love was always worth the risk. The morning would bring new challenges: Nathan's teething, Emma's spelling test, Rachel's conference call with Seattle. But they would face those challenges together, a family bound not by biology alone, but by choice and courage, and the kind of love that only deepens with honesty. And somewhere, Caleb liked to think, Sarah was watching with approval, glad that her daughter had a mother who showed up every day, glad that her former partner had found the courage to love again, glad that the family she'd worried about had found its way to wholeness. The story that had begun with a single unanswerable question had led them here, to this quiet bedroom in this chaotic house, to this life they'd built one brave choice at a time. And if someone asked Caleb now why he'd spent so long avoiding relationships, why he'd wasted years in silence, his answer would be simple. Because the woman he loved was worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth risking everything to finally claim. She'd been there all along, waiting with the patience of true love, until he finally found the courage to see what had always been right in front of him. And in finding that courage, in speaking that truth, he discovered that a single dad could indeed choose love. And in that choice, find not complication but completion, not burden but blessing, not an ending but a beautiful, messy, perfect new beginning.